Tonight, we're stepping into the world of Texas Rangers, the kind of men who've seen the back roads when they're empty, the crime scenes before the sun comes up, and the places locals warn you about in a voice they don't use for jokes. These aren't campfire legends. These are real encounters, the kind that don't make it into reports. Because some things don't fit on paper. In this video, you'll hear 4 Texas Rangers share their darkest real-life encounters. Cases that started normal, followed the rules, and then took a turn into something cold, unexplainable, and impossible to forget. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They watch and leave without subscribing. And by doing that, they miss the next true stories. We drop stories that get darker every time the night gets quieter. So don't be one of them. Hit subscribe now. Because once these rangers start talking, you'll realize Texas has corners even the law doesn't like to enter. And tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. Because tonight, the darkness is already moving. Now, let's dive in. My name's Colton Rains. I'm from Toya, Texas, and I work as a county road ranger. Listen, I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing this because it is 3 a.m., and I'm behind my trailer with my back against the skirting, and my phone screen is cracked, and I keep thinking I'm seeing headlights across the field. And I swear to God, if I don't say it out loud, it's going to keep living in my throat. I keep starting to talk and then I lose the order of it and I have to grab it again. So if I jump around, just stay with me. Okay, dude, just listen. That night started so normal, it makes me sick. I had 2 eggs, not fancy, just scrambled in a pan that's got a warped bottom, and a piece of toast I burned because the toaster sticks. And I drank coffee that tasted like the plastic lid because I reused the same travel cup too long. And I remember it because I was annoyed at myself for not buying filters, and I had grounds floating in it like sand. I was wearing my faded green work shirt, the one with the little stitched patch over the chest that just says road. And I had this brown stain on the left sleeve from when I leaned into a puddle under a busted culvert earlier that week. And no matter how much I scrub it, it won't come out. My boots were still damp from the morning before. My radio sat on the counter while I ate, and it kept making that quiet pop noise like it does when the battery's half tired. And I remember thinking I should swap the battery before shift, and then I didn't, because that's how it always goes. You tell yourself later and later turns into never. I punched in at 6:58 p.m. at the yard, 2 minutes early, because the guy before me likes to talk your ear off if you show up right at 7. And I didn't have the patience for it. The air was cold but not freezing, that dry kind of cold where your nose feels dusty inside, and the sky was clear, no clouds, stars sharp like pinholes. I checked my truck like I always do. Tires, cones, flares, the little first aid kit that's mostly empty because people take things out and never put things back. And I wrote down mileage on the clipboard with a pen that barely worked. The yard light had that hum, that mosquito in your ear, hum, and I remember I could hear it in my teeth. That's not me being dramatic. That's just what it was like. I'm telling you, that night had a sound to it, like something electrical wasn't grounded right. My job, for anyone who doesn't know, is not glamorous. I'm the guy who shows up when someone's out of gas on the shoulder, or there's debris in a lane, or a wreck needs cones until the tow shows up, or a cow gets loose and wanders too close to asphalt. I drive the county's ugly white truck with amber lights and a big arrow board on the back, and I'm supposed to keep people from getting hurt and keep traffic moving. Most nights, it's boring. You spend a lot of time staring at the same mile markers and the same dark mesquite and the same fences that don't end. That's why what happened sticks so bad, because there was nothing special about the start. It was a Thursday, I think. No, wait. I keep thinking Thursday because I had leftovers. I know that sounds dumb, but that's part of it. The edges of it don't hold still. I know it was the week before the county Christmas parade because I remember the little flyer on the break room table about road closures, and I remember laughing because they were acting like a parade of 3 floats was a big deal. I rolled out of the yard at 7:11 p.m. because the clock in the truck is always 6 minutes fast and I've learned to do the math. And I headed north on the farm road that runs past the old cotton gin ruins. I did my first loop, checked the usual trouble spots, the blind curve where people hit deer, the intersection where folks run the stop sign, the stretch where sand drifts across the shoulder. I helped a woman with a flat around 8'5". Her spare was bald like a billiard ball, and she kept saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." I told her, "You're fine, ma'am. Just drive slow to the tire place in town." And I watched her taillights fade, and I went back to listening to the radio chatter. Dispatch is not fancy either. Just a small room in the county building with a couple people and a lot of screens, and they talk to the sheriff's deputies, the volunteer firefighters, the road guys, and me. The voices change depending on who's on. That night, the dispatcher sounded young, like early 20s. A little too cheerful for night shift. She kept calling people sir and ma'am like she was trying to sound professional. I didn't know her name at the time. I found out later, and I'm not going to say it because that's not the point. And I don't want her getting pulled into this, even though I don't think she could help if she tried. Around 9:30 p.m., my stomach started doing that hollow thing, so I ate a packet of crackers from the glove box and drank the last of my coffee, and it was cold and tasted like old plastic, and I didn't care. I was on the far side of my route, the part where the pavement narrows and the reflectors are missing in places, and there's this long straight stretch that feels like it goes through nowhere, fences on both sides, scrub, and the occasional oil pump in the distance, moving slow like it's breathing. I got a call from dispatch at 10:14 p.m., and I know the time because I looked down at my watch when she said it. And my watch is old, but it keeps good time. She said, "Road unit, you copy?" We got a report of lights in the ditch off County Road 12, northbound side, near the old windmill. Caller says it looks like a vehicle off the road, no hazard lights. I said, "Copy, I'm close, I'll check." She said, "Be advised. I'm close in Never Timie. I'm close in Never Road. I'm close in Never Road. Deputy is tied up on another call, but you'll have backup en route." When you're alone on a dark road and you're about to walk up on something unknown, it helps to know someone is coming. I turned onto County Road 12, and the first thing that hit me was how quiet it got. Like, the tires on gravel make noise. The engine makes noise. But it was like the sound got swallowed. The headlights caught dust hanging in the air, and it looked thicker than it should have. Like the air was grainy. I clicked my radio and said, "Dispatch, I'm on 12, heading to the windmill." The young dispatcher came back. "Copy, road unit." Then, a second voice came over the radio, a male voice, deeper. "I'm 10 minutes out." Just like that, no call sign I recognized, just that sentence. I remember frowning, because everyone uses a call sign. Even the volunteers. You say who you are, you say what you're doing, but I figured maybe it was a deputy on a different channel patching in, or maybe someone new who hadn't learned the habit. I keyed up and said, "Copy, who's that?" And there was a pause, a little crackle. And then the young dispatcher said, "Backup is Unit 8. He's coming from the south." I said, "Copy, Unit 8. That meant nothing to me, because deputies have numbers, but I don't keep track of all of them. I'm not in their world. I keep my lane. Literally. I drove about 2 miles, and I started seeing it. Off to the right, down a shallow slope, there was a glow, like headlights pointed into brush. I pulled onto the shoulder, set my truck at an angle like I'm trained to, hit my amber lights, and the whole world got washed in that slow blinking orange. I grabbed my flashlight, the big one, and my reflective vest, and I stepped out. The cold hit my face, dry and sharp. I could smell dust and something else, like burnt wiring, faint but there. I walked toward the glow, crunching over gravel and dry grass. The ditch there isn't deep, just enough to catch a tire and pull you off. I shined my light down, and I saw a sedan nose down in the ditch, front end angled into the brush. The headlights were on, but the beam was blocked by mesquite. The driver door was open. That's the first wrong detail. Not the car. Cars go off roads. The open door. If you wreck, you either stay in or you get out. But you don't usually leave the door hanging open like you just stepped out to check your mail. I called out, "Hello? County Road, you okay?" My voice sounded small out there. No answer. I took another step, and my boots sank a little into soft dirt, like the ground had been disturbed. I swung the flashlight beam across the seat. Empty. No airbags deployed. The interior light was on, so the car had power. I could see a fast food cup in the holder, but no brand I recognized because the logo was turned away. I could see a jacket on the back seat. I could see a phone cable dangling. It looked like someone had just left it. I looked around, expecting to see footprints leading away. Or maybe someone sitting in the brush, hurt. The ditch was quiet. Too quiet. No insects. No coyotes. Dispatch. I've got a vehicle in the ditch. Door open. No occupant visible. The dispatcher said, "Copy, any injuries?" I said, "No one here that I can see." She said, "Unit 8 is still en route." Then that deep male voice cut in again, right over her, like he was closer to my channel than she was. And he said, "Stay with the car, don't go looking." That wasn't normal advice. The deputies will tell you to keep distance, sure, but the way he said it, it sounded like he was warning me about something specific, like he knew something I didn't. I said, "Who is this?" No answer. Just a hiss of static, like someone breathing too close to a mic. I stood there with my flashlight pointed at the open door, and I felt watched. Not like someone was hiding in the brush with a gun, not like that. Like the dark itself had eyes. I know how that sounds. I know. I didn't want to go down there again until backup arrived. I could wait. It wasn't like there was traffic. That road sees maybe one vehicle every half hour at night. I looked at my watch. 10:22 p.m. I keyed the radio again, trying to sound normal. Dispatch. Confirm Unit 8 ETA? Robra, the dispatcher said. He's about 7 minutes out. I said. Copy. I leaned against the door of my truck and tried to slow my breathing. I remember looking up at the stars and thinking they looked too bright, like the sky was closer than it should be. Then I saw lights. Far down the road behind me, a set of headlights appeared, and then another set, and then the flash of red and blue mixed in, low to the ground. Patrol lights, coming fast. Relief hit me so hard my knees felt weak. I said out loud to nobody, "Thank you." I swear I said it. The lights got closer, and I could tell it was a cruiser because of the pattern of the flashes, the way the red and blue bounced off the fence posts. I stepped out into the road a little, raising my arm, like I'm guiding him in. The lights kept coming, then slowed. Then the patrol lights dipped, like the vehicle had gone over a bump. And then, dude, this is where it starts to fall apart. Because the lights were right there, close enough I should have heard the engine. Close enough I should have seen the shape of the car. But all I saw was the lights, like the light itself without a source. It doesn't make sense. The red and blue flashes were sliding along the road, reflecting off the gravel, but there was no body around them. No silhouette, no tire noise. I remember my brain trying to correct it, trying to fill in the missing shape, like when you stare at something too long and your eyes make up details. I blinked hard. I rubbed my eyes with the heel of my hand. The lights kept rolling forward, like whoever was driving was looking at me, but there was no who. The lights went past me and kept going toward the ditch car, and I turned, following them. And I waited for the cruiser to stop near the ditch. It didn't. The lights kept going, straight through the spot where the road dips and the ditch rises. And then they were gone. just gone, like someone turned off a switch. 1 second, red and blue washing the fence. The next second, dark. No brake lights, no turn, no fade. Dark. I stood in the road like an idiot, my arm still half raised, and I could hear my own breathing loud in my ears. I keyed my radio so fast my thumb slipped. "Dispatch, did Unit 8 just pass my location?" The dispatcher said, "Negative, Unit 8 is still en route." I said, "No, I saw patrol lights, they passed me." The dispatcher hesitated, and I could hear typing. Then she said, "Road Unit, we have no Deputy Unit 8 assigned tonight." That sentence landed like a rock in my chest. I said, "You just told me Unit 8 is coming." She said, "I'm looking at the roster. We have Units 2, 3, and 5 on. No Unit 8. I said, "Then who has been talking on my channel?" She said, "I don't have anyone else patched to you." And then that deep male voice came back again, calm as ever. And he said, "You see why I said don't go looking?" I spun, like I could catch him standing behind me. There was nothing but my truck, the ditch, the open car door, and miles of dark road. I said, "Where are you?" No answer. The radio gave me that close breath static again. The hair on my arm stood up under my vest. I wanted to get in my truck and leave. I'm not going to pretend I didn't, but my job is to secure scenes. And there was a car in a ditch with an open door. And what if a person was out there hurt? What if they wandered off? If I left and they died, that's on me. That's the tug, you know, duty versus fear. And I hate that I even have to say duty, because I'm not that guy. I'm not noble. I just don't want someone dead because I got spooked. I told dispatch, "Send whoever you can. Send fire, send anyone. I'm not alone out here," the dispatcher said, and her voice had changed, less cheerful. "Copy, stand by. I'll notify Unit 2. I said, "Do it now." She said, "Unit 2 is tied up on a domestic." I said, "Then send Unit 3. She said, "Unit 3 is out of the county transporting." I said, "Then who is on duty?" There was a pause, and she said, "Unit 5 is on a traffic stop." I said, "Tell him to brake and come." She said, "Copy." While she did that, I kept my flashlight sweeping the brush around the ditch car. The beam caught dust and thorn, and the pale underside of leaves. It didn't catch a person. I kept hearing little sounds, like faint taps, and every time I swung the light, there was nothing. I told myself it was the wind shifting branches, except there wasn't any wind. The air was dead still. The smell of burnt wiring got stronger, and I realized it was coming from the ditch car. Not smoke, just that hot metal smell like a battery's been stressed. I took a step closer to the ditch again, just enough to see the dashboard. The gauges were lit. The radio in the car was on. Low, just static. I could hear it faintly, a hiss, like the car was listening to the same nothing my radio was. That made my stomach turn. I said to myself, "No." I didn't mean no like a decision. I meant no like a plea. I walked back to my truck and got my cone bag. If I had to wait, Conbag Larton, I could at least set a few cones to make sure any passing vehicle slowed. I set 3 cones along the shoulder, spaced out, and the orange plastic looked too bright under my amber lights, like toy pieces in a black world. I checked my watch again, 10:31 p.m. I told myself, okay, backup from Unit 5 will be here any minute. I tried to focus on normal tasks. I wrote down the car's position on my clipboard, because my hands needed something to do. I wrote Sedan off CR12, near windmill. Door open, lights on. My pen scratched in the quiet. Then the radio in my truck clicked by itself, like someone had keyed it. I looked down at it. The display flickered, then steadied, and I heard my own voice, not like an echo, my voice saying, "Dispatch. I've got a vehicle in the ditch. Door open, no occupant visible." It was the exact sentence I'd said, in the same tone, but it was coming through my speaker like a replay. I stared at the radio like it was going to bite me. Then the young dispatcher's voice came, but wrong, like slowed down, and she said, "Copy. Any injuries?" And then my voice again. "No one here that I can see." It was like the radio was playing back the last few minutes. But it wasn't a recording device. It's just a two-way. I grabbed the mic and said, "Dispatch, are you hearing this?" The radio didn't answer. It kept playing. Then, over the replay, that deep male voice cut in and said, "Stay with the car. Don't go looking." Exactly like before. The hairs on my neck went up so hard it felt like a cold hand touched me. I ripped the mic cord out of the mount, like that would stop it. And the sound kept coming through the speaker. I turned the volume knob down. The sound kept coming, low, like it was inside the plastic. I turned the radio off. The sound kept coming, faint but there, like a memory you can't shut up. I slammed my palm against the face of it and yelled, "Stop." It was just a reaction. The sound stopped for a second. Then the speaker hissed, and my own voice came through, quieter, like it was right next to my ear, and it said, "He's coming from the south." That wasn't a sentence, I'd said. That was the dispatcher's line, but in my voice. It was mixing. It was learning. It was wearing voices, like a jacket. I got back out of the truck because being inside with that radio felt like being trapped with something in a closet. I stood by my hood, breathing hard, looking down the road both ways. That's when I saw the patrol lights again. Far away behind me, red and blue, coming fast. This time, I didn't feel relief. I felt dread, like my body recognized a pattern my brain didn't want. I kept my eyes on the lights as they approached. They got closer. Still no engine noise. I could hear my own truck idling, so it wasn't like sound didn't exist. The patrol lights came up the road and slowed. And again, I could not see a vehicle body. I could see the light reflections, the pulses on the fence posts, the gravel flashing, but no cruiser. It was like the lights were floating at the height a light bar would be, moving like a car, but empty. The lights flashed red and blue in my face, and I could feel heat from them, like real bulbs. My eyes watered. I stepped back, shielding my face, and I called out, "Who is this?" I know it's dumb to yell at lights, but what else do you do? And then, from the darkness where the driver window should have been, I heard a voice, not from the radio, from the air. And it said, "Calm. You called for me." It was the deep male voice. It sounded like it was sitting in a seat, like it came from a person, but there was no person. I took another step back until my back hit the side of my truck. I said, "Show yourself." The voice said, "You already saw me pass." I said, "That wasn't real." The voice said, "You keep saying back up like it means something." My mouth went dry. I said, "What are you?" And I know that's a movie line, but I swear I wasn't thinking. I was just trying to name it, because if you name something, it feels less huge. The voice said, "I'm the one they sent." Then the lights shifted, like the whole bar tilted, and I realized the red and blue weren't alternating right. The pattern was wrong. It was too precise, too perfect. Same flash, same pause, same flash, over and over, no variation. Real light bars have little irregularities, the way bulbs warm, the way reflections change. This was like a metronome. My ears started ringing. I couldn't tell if it was the lights or my blood pressure. I said, "Dispatch," into my handheld mic, even though I'd pulled it loose. "Dispatch, I need Unit 5 now." My radio, in my truck, which I'd turned off, answered back in that young dispatcher's voice, right behind me. "Unit 5 is on a traffic stop." I whipped around and stared at my dark cab. The radio display was off. No power. But the voice came anyway. Then my own voice came through, from the same dark cab, and it said, "Tell him to brake and come," like it was mocking me with my own words. The floating patrol lights in front of me stopped flashing for one beat, one single beat, like a blink. And in that beat, the road went completely dark. And in that darkness, I felt something look at me, not a face, just attention, like a hand pressed flat against my chest from the inside. The lights started again, and the deep voice said, "Go check the ditch." I shook my head. I said, "No." The voice said, "That's why you called, so you wouldn't be alone when you looked." I said, "I didn't call you." The voice said, "You did." And then, dude, I swear to God, my watch buzzed. My watch is not a fancy watch. It doesn't buzz. It's analog, but it made this tiny vibration against my wrist, and when I looked down, the hands were spinning backwards, not fast like a cartoon. Slow, steady, ticking the wrong direction. I stared at it and my stomach dropped. I heard myself say, "That's not possible," out loud. The voice said, "Time is just a call sign." I don't know why that sentence broke me, but it did, because it sounded like something a person would say if they were trying to sound like a person, like it had heard humans talk and it was stitching phrases together. My legs started shaking. I wanted to run, but where? My truck was behind me, but to get in, I'd have to turn my back on the lights, and I couldn't do that. I took a step sideways, keeping the lights in view, and I reached for my door handle without looking, and my hand hit cold metal, and I yanked, and the door opened, and I dove in like a kid jumping into bed to escape something under it. I slammed the door and locked it. I'm telling you, I locked it. I watched the lock button go down. I sat there, breathing hard, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and the patrol lights were still right outside, flashing through my windshield. There was still no vehicle body, just lights. I turned the key, even though the truck was already idling, and I threw it into drive. I told myself, leave. Just leave. Write it up later. Let someone else deal with the ditch car. As soon as I put it in drive, the engine sputtered, like it choked. The dashboard lights dimmed. The truck shuddered. The radio, dead, came on by itself, and my own voice filled the cab. Not through the speaker now, but like it was in the passenger seat, and it said, "Stay with the car." I looked at the passenger seat, empty, but I felt a pressure there, like someone had sat down, and the seat cushion remembered. The patrol lights outside moved, sliding toward my driver window, like the thing was leaning in to look at me. I couldn't breathe. I turned the wheel hard and hit the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires spitting gravel, and I drove straight through where the patrol lights had been. The flashes washed over my hood and then were behind me. And for a second I thought I'd made it. I thought I'd outrun it. And then in my rearview mirror, I saw the patrol lights again. Right behind me, matching my speed. Silent, no headlights, just that red-blue loop. I slammed the accelerator. The speedometer climbed. The road was straight. I should have been eating distance. But the lights stayed the same distance behind me, like they were tethered. I glanced down at the mile marker on the right as I passed it. It said 12. I knew I'd been near the windmill at about mile 17. I'd driven this road for years. I looked ahead, heart pounding, and I saw another mile marker coming. It said 12. Same number. I told myself I was seeing it wrong. Dust. Reflection. I blinked and looked again as it passed my window. 12. My throat tightened. I kept driving. Another mile marker. 12. Again. Perfectly spaced. I said, "No, no, no," like that would change it. The radio crackled and the young dispatcher's voice came through, cheerful again, like nothing was wrong. And she said, "Road unit? Status update?" I grabbed the mic and shouted, I'm leaving County Road 12. I have patrol lights following me, with no vehicle. Do you hear me?" There was a pause. Then the dispatcher said, "Road unit, I show you stationary." I said, "I'm moving. I'm doing 65. She said, "Your GPS pings are not changing." I looked down at the little county-issued tablet mounted to my dash. The map showed a dot. My dot. It was sitting right where the ditch car was, not moving. Meanwhile, my headlights were eating road. My tires were roaring. My hands were white on the wheel. I shouted, "That's wrong." The dispatcher said, "Road unit, calm down. Unit 5 is 10 minutes out." I screamed, "Stop saying 10 minutes." And then I heard the deep male voice, soft, close, like it was leaning over my shoulder, and it said, "You can drive forever and you'll still be waiting." My eyes filled with tears, not because I'm soft, but because my body was overloaded. I wiped them with my sleeve and nearly drifted. I forced myself to focus on the road. The road looked the same. The same little glint, the same distance, the same angle. That road has missing reflectors. I know it. The patrol lights behind me stayed steady. I tried to call Unit 5 directly, but I don't have his channel. I tried to call dispatch again, and the radio responded with my own voice, repeating my words half a second late, like an echo, like it was chewing them and spitting them back. I'm leaving. I'm leaving." I felt like I was inside a loop, like every sentence I made got added to a tape that would play again. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned off the road. I saw a ranch gate on the left, one of those metal pipe gates with a chain. I swung my truck toward it at speed and slammed on brakes, tires skidding on gravel, and I hit the gate with my bumper. Not hard enough to destroy my truck, but hard enough to break the chain. The gate swung inward with a screech. I drove through, bouncing over ruts into a field. The ground was rough. My truck rocked. The patrol lights followed, right through the gate, still silent, still perfect. I drove across the field toward a stand of trees, hoping the rough ground would slow whatever it was. The lights stayed behind me at the same distance, like they weren't touching the ground at all. I could see dust lifting in my headlights, but the patrol lights didn't kick up dust. That's when I knew it wasn't a vehicle. It wasn't even pretending right. I drove until the field ended at a shallow ravine, a dry wash. The headlights caught it too late. I slammed brakes and the truck skidded and stopped with the front tires right at the edge. The ravine dropped maybe 6 feet, then rose again. If I went forward, I'd drop in and maybe get stuck. I threw the truck into reverse and backed up, but the ground was soft and my tires spun. The truck rocked but didn't move. I sat there panting, hands shaking, and then the radio, off, spoke again. And this time it wasn't the deep male voice. It was Unit 5. I recognized him because I'd heard him on the channel before. Older guy, gravelly. He said, "Road unit, I'm on 12. Where are you at?" Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. I grabbed the mic and yelled, "I'm in a field off 12. I broke through a gate. I'm stuck near a wash. I need you now." Unit 5 said, "Copy. I don't see any gate. I'm at the windmill," I said. "That's where I was. But I'm not there now." He said, "You sure? I see your truck. Amber lights. You're right here. I froze. I looked out my windshield. I did not see my amber lights ahead. I saw a dark field, my own headlights, the wash. I looked in my side mirror. Nothing, just brush. I looked in the rearview mirror. Patrol lights, red and blue, silent. Unit 5 said again. Road unit. You out of the truck? Road unit, you out of the truck? I whispered. No. My voice came out small. Unit 5 said, Then why am I looking at your empty truck? I felt my stomach drop, like I'd missed a step. I said, I'm not empty, he said. I'm telling you, I'm standing at your driver door. It's open. I looked down. My driver door was closed, locked. I could feel the vibration of the engine under my feet. I could smell the dusty heater. I said, That's not my truck. Unit 5 said, It's your plate. It's your aero board. It's your cone still in the bag. I started shaking so hard my teeth clicked. I said, Listen to me. I'm stuck in a field. I can see patrol lights with no car behind me. There was silence. Then Unit 5 said, slower. Road unit, I don't have any patrol lights out here. I said, They're right behind me. He said, Behind you is darkness. Then the deep male voice slid into the channel, smooth as oil. And he said, Tell him to look closer. Unit 5 snapped. Who is that? The deep voice said, Back up. Unit 5 said, Identify. The deep voice said, Unit 8. Unit 5 went quiet. Then he said very low, There's no Unit 8. The deep voice said, There is tonight. And then, dude, the patrol lights behind me started to move. Not like a car rolling, like something getting out. The lights lifted higher, rising up, like the light bar was being raised on invisible arms. The flashes washed across the trees and the field, and for a second, I saw shapes in the light. Not bodies, just impressions. Like the air had dents in it, where something stood. The pressure in my chest got worse, like something was leaning on my ribs. I couldn't breathe. I tried to open my door, but the handle wouldn't move. It was like it was welded. I kicked it with my boot. Nothing. The glass didn't even rattle. The truck had become a box. The deep voice said, Or, Rista, you asked not to be alone. I croaked. I asked for a deputy. The voice said, Same thing. My vision narrowed. The red and blue flashes started to sync with my heartbeat. I could feel my pulse in my fingers. I heard Unit 5 in the radio. Distant now. Like he was far away, yelling, Road unit, talk to me. I tried. I swear I tried. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Then I saw something in my headlights, beyond the wash. A figure, not moving. Just standing. It was shaped like a man, and it was standing in the dry ravine, facing me. My brain clung to that because it was something solid, something I could understand. I leaned forward, squinting, and the red-blue flashes from behind me hit it, and the figure was wearing reflective strips like mine, a vest like mine, and it had a flashlight in its hand, pointed down. I stared at it, and it lifted its head, and I saw my own face. Not a perfect mirror, not like a twin, like a blurry version of me. Like someone had tried to remember my face from a distance and got it close, but wrong around the eyes. It raised the flashlight slowly and pointed it at my truck. The beam hit my windshield, and for a second I saw myself reflected in the glass. And behind that reflection, I saw the inside of my truck was empty. No me, just an empty seat. I blinked and the reflection changed back to normal. Me in the seat, hands on the wheel. But my mind had already grabbed that image and wouldn't let go. Unit 5 shouted again, Road unit, I'm at your truck. Your door is open. Answer me. The deep voice said, He can't. He's busy waiting. The figure in the ravine took one step forward. The gravel under its boot did not crunch. It raised its free hand and tapped the air in front of it, like it was touching an invisible wall. Then my windshield, my actual windshield, got cold. I felt it, like frost crawling. The glass fogged from the outside inward, even though the air was dry. I watched a handprint appear on the glass from the outside, fingers splayed. Then another, like someone pressing both palms to it. The handprints were too big. Then I heard a knock. Not on the glass, inside my head, like someone knocking from within my skull. 3 knocks, perfectly spaced. The deep voice said, Open up. I whispered, I can't. The deep voice said, You already did. And then the radio, in the truck, played my own voice again, but not from tonight, from a different time. I heard myself say, clear as day, Unit 8, I'm on scene, come on up. I had no memory of saying that. Unit 5 said, Faint. Road unit. Why you asking for Unit 8? I tried to answer, and I couldn't. The figure in the ravine stepped again, skipping closer, until it was right at the edge of the wash under my headlights. Its vest strips flared bright. Its face looked like mine, wearing my skin wrong. It lifted its mouth and spoke, and the sound did not come from its lips. The sound came from my radio at the same time, and it was my own voice saying, Colton, you called. I started crying then, real tears, because I felt like I was being peeled open. I said, I didn't. The figure tilted its head. Then it smiled, just a little, like it was practicing, and it pointed past me, toward the back seat of my truck. My blood went cold. I did not want to look. I kept my eyes on that wrong face ahead, and I whispered, No. The deep voice said, Look. The patrol lights behind me flashed faster, like excitement. I forced myself to glance in the rearview mirror. There was someone in my back seat, not fully seen, because the mirror angle only gives you a slice. But I saw a shoulder, a dark uniform shape, and a light bar glow reflected in the window glass. I smelled burnt wiring stronger, like something overheating. I heard a seatbelt click. I heard a man clear his throat, right behind my ear, and he said politely, Evening. My whole body locked. I could not move. I could not breathe. I stared forward at the figure outside, and it stared back, smile fixed. Unit 5, far away, was shouting, Road unit, your truck is empty. I'm looking right at the seat. Where are you? The voice behind me said, Tell him you're here. I squeezed my eyes shut and shook my head. The voice behind me said, If you don't answer, he'll leave. He'll write it off. He'll say you wandered. My eyes snapped open. I yelled into the mic, voice cracking. Unit 5, do not leave. Do you hear me? Do not leave my truck, Unit 5 said. I'm not leaving. I'm at your door. I said. Then tell me what you see. He said. I see your clipboard on the seat. I see your vest on the floor. I see the truck running. I do not see you. I looked down at my own lap. My vest was on my body. My clipboard was on the passenger seat. My hands were on the wheel. I was there. I was there. But he couldn't see me. People, you come not neen. I looked down at my own lap, but he couldn't see me. The voice behind me said, He can't see what hasn't happened yet. That sentence made my stomach turn because it sounded like a rule, like this thing lived by rules. I said, What do you want? The voice behind me said, Finish the call. I said, What call? The voice behind me said, The one you started when you saw the lights. The figure outside lifted its hand and mimed, holding a radio mic to its mouth. It nodded, like coaching me. I felt like a puppet. The patrol lights behind me flashed in perfect rhythm. The mile marker numbers in my mind repeated. 12, 12, 12. The knocking inside my skull returned, 3 perfect knocks. I realized, with a sick clarity, that this whole thing was built on me waiting, me calling, me expecting help. That was the hook. That was the trigger. I had asked the dark to send me company, and it had. Not a person, not a deputy. Something that fit the shape of backup the way a glove fits a hand, and it was offended I didn't accept it. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. I thought about my trailer, my little kitchen, my burned toast, my warped pan, my coffee with grounds, my normal life. I thought about how I would never feel normal again if I didn't break the pattern. I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. And it sounds stupid, but I need you to hear it because it's the only reason I'm here. I stopped calling for help. I stopped asking. I turned my radio mic over in my hand and I placed it on the floorboard. I said out loud to the air, "I don't need backup." The deep voice behind me chuckled, just once, like a breath. The figure outside frowned, like it didn't like the line. I said again, louder, "I don't need backup. I'm leaving." The voice behind me said, "You can't." I said, "Watch me." I reached down and pulled the emergency brake handle hard, then released it, then pulled it again, like a reset. And I don't know why I did that. It was instinct. Like when something's glitching, you slap it. The truck shuddered. The lights on the dash flickered. For 1 second, the patrol lights behind me cut out. Complete darkness. In that darkness, I heard breathing that was not mine, slow and patient, like an animal waiting. Then the patrol lights snapped back on, but they were farther away. Not gone. Farther, like my words had shoved them back an inch. I pressed my advantage, because it felt like a small crack in a wall. I started talking. Not into the mic, just talking, like I was drowning and grabbing air. I said, "My name's Colton Rains. I'm from Toya, Texas, and I work as a county road ranger. I'm on County Road 12, and I do not need backup." I repeated it, like a mantra, like a badge. The figure outside took a step back. The wrong smile slipped. The voice behind me tightened, less polite. And it said, "That's not how it works." I said, "I don't care how it works." The truck engine surged. The tires grabbed, like the ground finally remembered it was ground. The truck jerked backward away from the wash. I nearly hit my head on the headrest. I slammed it into reverse again, and this time it moved, rolling over ruts, bumping, and the patrol lights behind me slid farther back, like they were on ice. I backed up until I had room. Then I swung the wheel and aimed toward the broken gate. The figure outside the ravine moved, skipping again, trying to get in front of me, but it was slower now, like the loop was breaking. The voice behind me said sharp now, "Call it in." I shouted, "No." I drove. I hit the field hard, bouncing, and I didn't look in the mirror, because if I looked, I'd give it attention, and I knew attention was food. I kept repeating, "I don't need backup. I don't need backup." My throat burned. I could taste copper. I reached the gate and I saw it was still open, hanging crooked. I drove through, tires scraping, and I hit the county road again. The moment my tires touched gravel, the air changed. Sound came back. I heard my engine roar. I heard the crunch of stones. I heard wind, faint. I looked in the rearview mirror before I could stop myself. I shouted into the night, "Unit 5. I grabbed the mic and keyed it and yelled, "Unit 5, where are you?" Silence. Then the young dispatcher came on, normal tone, like nothing ever happened, and she said, "Road unit? Status?" I was sobbing. I said, "I left the scene. I left the ditch car. I need you to tell me where Unit 5 is." She said, "Unit 5 cleared the county an hour ago." He went home sick. I said, no, he was talking to me. She said, we have no record of Unit 5 on your channel. I said, then who was that voice? She said, Road Unit, are you alone? I laughed, a broken sound. Because, what a question. I said, I don't know. She said, your GPS pings are back. You are moving northbound on 12. I looked at the tablet. The dot was moving now, matching what my eyes saw. I said, send someone to that ditch car. She said, copy. I'll notify the deputy. I said, there is no Unit 8. She paused. I am I one use. I am I you said. Was sem I one you said. I am I one you said. I am I one you said. I am. Then she said, correct. I drove until I hit the paved highway. And I didn't stop until I was under lights. Real lights. At the one gas station that stays open late. The one with the flickering sign that makes a buzzing sound. I pulled up near the pumps, even though I didn't need gas, because I needed cameras, I needed witnesses, I needed something that felt like rules. I sat there shaking, hands locked on the wheel. I looked at my watch. The hands were normal again. It said 10:19 p.m. That's impossible. I knew it was past 10:30. I'd watched it. I'd lived it. But my watch said 10:19 like the whole thing had snapped backward. I checked my phone. My phone said 1:47 a.m. My phone was right. My watch was wrong. My truck clock, the one that's always 6 minutes fast, said 10:25 p.m. 3 different times. I sat there until my breathing slowed. I went inside the gas station, and the clerk looked up and said, "You okay, man?" And I said, "Yeah, because what do you say?" I bought a bottle of water I didn't drink. I stood by the hot coffee machine just to feel heat. My radio was quiet. Finally, I drove back to the yard at what my phone said was almost 2:30 a.m. And the yard gate was locked like it should be, and the lights hummed like always. And I parked my truck and tried to write my report. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I wrote the first sentence. And then I stared at the paper and realized my clipboard was not the clipboard I'd started the shift with. Mine has a crack in the corner and a strip of tape. This clipboard was clean, new. The pen clipped to it was not my pen. It was a different pen, black and smooth. There was already writing on the paper. Not mine. The handwriting looked like mine, trying to be mine. It said, in block letters, "Waited for backup. Backup arrived. No vehicle." I dropped it like it burned me. I went into the break room and checked the sign-in sheet. My name was there twice, once at 6:58 p.m. like it should be, and once at 10:12 p.m., written in the same ink, same slant, like I'd punched in twice. I stood there staring at it until my eyes blurred. I went to the supervisor's office the next morning, after I'd sat in my trailer staring at the wall until sunrise, and I told him I needed to see the dispatch logs. He frowned, like I was being dramatic, but he printed them. My radio transmissions were there, but the log showed me arriving on scene at 10:14 p.m. and clearing at 10:16 p.m. 2 minutes. That's all. Like I'd never waited. Like I'd never run. Like I'd never broken a gate. I told him, "That's wrong." He said, "That's what the system shows." I said, "Check the deputy roster. Ass, commas, arsedent, and commas." I said, "Check the deputy roster. Who was Unit 8? He laughed, like it was a joke, and he said, "There hasn't been a Unit 8 in years." I asked, "What do you mean years?" He said, "We used to have Unit 8 when we had an extra deputy assigned to nights, but that position got cut. The number got retired." I said, "Why?" He shrugged. He said, budget. I said, who was the last Unit 8? He said, before your time. I asked dispatch about the young dispatcher, and she swore she never said Unit 8. She swore on her mom. She showed me her screen. There was no Unit 8. I asked her if she'd heard any other voice on my channel, and she said no, and she looked at me like she was scared of me, like I was unstable. I tried to tell Unit 5 about it, the real Unit 5. When he came back to work the next week, and he said he never talked to me that night, and he got quiet and said, don't mess with me, Colton. Like I was accusing him of lying. I showed him my call history. There was a call to his number at 1:12 a.m., lasting 3 minutes. He stared at it and shook his head and said, I was asleep. I asked him if he'd ever heard of Unit 8. He said, that number's dead. And then he said something I can't stop thinking about. He said, my granddad used to say if you call into the dark too many times, the dark starts answering. I laughed then, nervous, and he didn't laugh. I went back out to County Road 12 inches daylight to look for the broken gate. I needed proof I'd been in that field. I drove the whole stretch. I found the windmill. I found the ditch. The car was gone. No tire tracks. No disturbed brush. Nothing. I found the gate I'd hit. The chain was intact. Not new chain. Old chain. Rusted. Links tight. The gate was closed. I got out and rattled it. Solid. No bend. No scrape marks from a bumper. I stood there in the daylight with my hands on the cold metal, and I felt like I was going to throw up. They were normal numbers. Not 12 over and over. But now, every time I drive that road at night, I can't look at mile markers without my stomach tightening. And here's the part I don't like telling, but it's the proof part. The part that makes me know it wasn't a bad dream. 3 days after that shift, what I proved that wasn't a so. One make I flew part. I woke up on my trailer floor with my boots still on, and my work shirt still on, and my phone dead beside my cheek, and the sun was coming through the blinds, and my mouth tasted like pennies. I sat up and my whole body ached like I'd been tensed for hours. I checked the date on my phone after I charged it. It was 3 days later. 3 days. I had no memory of them. My calendar had a note I didn't write that said, call back up first. And I swear I did not type that. My truck at the yard had mud on the tires like it had been off-road. And the supervisor asked me why I'd put an extra 40 miles on it during those days. And I stared at him because I hadn't been at work. He showed me the mileage logs. My signature was on them. Not exactly my signature, but close enough you'd accept it. And the scariest part is not even that. The scariest part is that sometimes, late at night, when my trailer is quiet, and the fridge clicks, and the wind taps the skirting, my county radio, which I keep turned off now, will make a single pop noise. Just one, like a mic keying. And then, very faint, like from far away, I'll hear that deep voice say, polite as anything, I'm 10 minutes out. I don't go to County Road 12 after dark anymore. I tell people the truth. I can tell without sounding crazy. I say it's too isolated and it's not safe alone. And they laugh and call me cautious. And I let them, because I would rather be laughed at than be heard. I don't call for backup unless I have to. And when I do, I say the unit number twice and I make dispatch repeat it, because I'm terrified of saying the wrong thing and inviting something that fits the shape of help. And if you ever find yourself on a lonely road and you see patrol lights coming and you can't hear the engine, don't stand there waving like you're glad. Don't say thank you. Don't call it in. Just get somewhere with real people and real noise and real rules. Because I'm telling you, listen, I'm telling you, there are things out there that will answer if you keep asking, and they don't care what you meant. My name's Wade Hollister. I'm from the back end of San Angelo by the river bridge, and I work as a night shift ranger for a county park that sits out where the highway lights stop trying. I'm whispering because my trailer walls are thin, and I don't want my neighbors hearing me talk like this. And I know how that sounds. But listen, I swear to God, I am not trying to scare anybody. I'm trying to get this out of me because it keeps playing in my head like it's still happening. It's 3 in the morning, and I'm behind my trailer with my phone cracked right across the middle, and I keep looking over my shoulder at my own back door like somebody's going to step out of it without opening it. I have not slept right since that week. I keep telling myself it was stress. It was a weird run of nights. It was the storm. It was the bad coffee. It was my brain doing tricks. But then I remember the tape. I remember the way it ended. I remember the door unlocking. The day it started was so normal it makes me angry now. I had 2 eggs because that's what was left. I fried them too hard because I got distracted by the weather radio squawking about wind, and I ate them standing up in my kitchen in that same tan work shirt I always wear. The one with the stitched patch on the chest that makes me look more official than I feel. There's a stain under the pocket from when I leaned into the hood of my truck and the oil cap slipped, and I've washed it so many times it set like it grew there. I remember glancing at the clock over my sink and seeing 5:41. And I remember because I was running early for once, and it felt good. I packed a sandwich that I didn't even end up eating, peanut butter and jelly, and I grabbed my keys and my little flashlight and my radio, and I drove out past the last gas station with the flickering sign, and I watched the town fall away in my rear view like it was embarrassed to be seen with me. The park office is a squat building. Cinder block. Old carpet. 2 little rooms up front, and then the back hall where we keep the lost and found junk and the paperwork nobody wants. There's an interview room back there too. We call it that because that's what it was built as. But it's really just a small room with a table bolted down and a couple chairs and a camera in the corner that hasn't worked right since before I got hired. We don't get real criminals. We get lost hikers, drunk campers, people who think rules are a suggestion. And sometimes we get folks we hand off to the county when they do something that crosses the line. I clocked in at 6:17. I can tell you that because I wrote it in my shift log with a pen that kept skipping. The forecast said storms, but the sky was that dull, flat gray that feels like it could stay like that forever. Like morning got stuck halfway. I did my rounds. I checked the gates. I drove the loop road slow because there were deer out. And I remember thinking how quiet it was, how the quiet had weight to it. Like it sat on the hood of my truck and made the engine sound too loud. Around 9, the call came over my radio from dispatch, and the dispatcher's voice had that careful tone, the one they use when they're trying not to make something bigger than it is. She said there was a man on county land near the old service shed, not on the public trail, just standing there by the fence line, and somebody had seen him earlier too. She asked if I could go make contact. I said sure. Because that's my whole job, man. To go ask the question nobody wants to ask. I drove over there, and I saw him before I even parked. He was just standing where the grass turns to gravel, facing the shed like he was waiting for it to do something. He wasn't dressed for the weather. That's the first wrong detail I noticed. Not big wrong, just off. He had on a light jacket and clean shoes, like he stepped out of a car in town. But his pants were dusty from the knee down, and his hands were empty. When I rolled down my window, I did the normal thing. I called out, "Hey buddy, you lost. You need help." And he didn't even turn his head. I got out and I walked closer, and I kept my voice steady, and I said, "Sir, you can't be back here. You need to come with me to the office and we can sort it out." Still nothing, not even a flinch. That made me nervous. Not because he looked dangerous, but because he looked like he wasn't fully inside his body. Like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I stepped around so I could see his face and he finally looked at me. But it was like his eyes landed on my chest. Not my eyes. Like he was reading the patch, reading the shirt, reading the stain. His mouth was closed tight. His jaw muscles were working like he was chewing something with no food in it. I asked if he could hear me. He blinked once. Slow. Like he was doing it on purpose. I said, "Listen, "Man, you can either walk with me or I'm going to have to call this in." And when I said that, he finally moved. But not the way people move. He took one step back. Not away from me. Back like he was trying to step out of the spot he was standing on. His heel hit a rock and he stumbled, and for a second his face changed, like he felt fear, and then it went blank again. I'm telling you that because later I would question it, and I hate that about myself. I called dispatch and asked for a deputy to meet me at the office. While I waited, I talked to the man in that stupid polite voice you use when you're trying to keep a situation from tipping. He looked at me like I was talking through glass. When the deputy arrived, we guided him back. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He walked like his joints were stiff. Like every step was a decision he didn't want to make. We got him into the interview room because it's the only place back there that locks, and we didn't want him wandering through the office or bolting into the dark if he snapped. We sat him at the table and we asked the same questions. What's your name? Where did you come from? Do you have a vehicle? Do you have anyone we can call? Nothing. No words. Not even a shake of the head. The deputy tried being firm. I tried being calm. We weren't mean. We weren't threatening. We were just trying to get a handle on what we had. The deputy finally said, "All right." And I stayed in the room because, again, I'm stupid. I thought maybe he would talk if it was just one person. I sat across from him, and I listened to the building hum. The lights back there buzz when the wind kicks up. That day, the wind was starting to push at the walls, and every so often the whole place would give this little shiver like it was alive. I remember how the man's breathing sounded. That's another detail that shouldn't matter. It was too quiet. He was breathing, his chest moved, but it was like his breath didn't make it out into the room. I kept my eyes on his hands. His hands were clean. His nails were short. No scratches. No dirt under them. He had one pale line on his ring finger like he used to wear a band. I said, "Listen, you don't have to answer everything. Just tell me one thing. Are you hurt?" And his lips parted like he was about to speak, and then the doorknob behind me clicked. Not opened, just clicked. Like somebody tested it. I turned around fast, and nobody was there. The deputy was in the hall. I could hear him talking, and the other staff was up front. The hall behind that door was empty. I even stepped out and looked both ways. Nothing. I told myself it was the wind, or the latch settling, or my nerves. He stared at it like he was waiting for it to click again. I felt that itch on my neck, the one you get when you know you're being watched. I said, "Okay, all right. We're going to just wait." And I sat there in that chair, trying to act like my heart wasn't thumping. The deputy came back in about 10 minutes later. He said no record, no missing person matching, nothing obvious, and he said we'd have to transport him to the county office for proper processing because we weren't equipped. The man didn't react. The deputy leaned down and spoke right into his face. It didn't show teeth. It was just the corners of his mouth lifting like he was copying a picture of a smile he'd seen somewhere. The deputy pulled back and looked at me like, "What is wrong with this guy?" And I shrugged because I didn't have an answer. We got him up, we walked him out, we handed him off, and I thought that was the end. I thought it was just a weird trespasser, maybe somebody having a mental break, maybe somebody on something, maybe somebody who'd been through something terrible and shut down. The day kept going. The storm rolled closer. Around late afternoon, the sky turned that greenish gray that makes you want to get under something solid. The wind got loud enough to drown out the radio sometimes. I stayed late to finish reports because my paperwork piles up when anything out of the ordinary happens. The deputy asked if we had recorded the interview. I told him the camera didn't work. He said we should start using an audio recorder as backup, just for documentation. Because it helps later if somebody says we mistreated them or said something we didn't say. I told him we had an old recorder somewhere, and he said get a working one. That's the trigger, man. That stupid practical suggestion. It felt smart. It felt responsible. I drove into town the next morning, before my shift, and I bought a basic digital recorder. Nothing fancy, the kind you can stick in a shirt pocket. I kept the receipt because I always keep receipts like I'm going to get audited for being alive. That night I brought it in, put fresh batteries in it, tested it, and it worked fine. I recorded myself saying the date and time, just to check, and I played it back and it sounded normal. My voice a little tinny, the room noise in the background, the hum. I put it in the interview room drawer with the notepad. I didn't think about it again until the second man showed up. Yes, there was a second one, not the same guy. This one came in with a group of campers who said he'd been standing by their site for hours, not moving, just facing their fire like he was trying to warm his face without blinking. They said they tried talking to him and he didn't answer. They said he didn't look drunk. They said he didn't look homeless. He looked like he belonged somewhere else. I asked them if they knew him, and they said no. I asked if he had a car nearby, and they said they didn't see one. They were spooked enough that they packed up and drove to the office with him, trailing behind like a shadow that got lost and found again. I met them outside. The man stood under the porch light and didn't look up at the light. That's another wrong detail. Everybody looks at a bright light in the dark. He didn't. His eyes stayed level, like he didn't need to adjust. I said, "Hey sir, you all right?" And he turned his head slow toward me. And for a second I thought he was about to speak because his lips moved like he was forming a word. And then nothing came out. The campers talked over each other. One woman kept saying, "He's been there since before sunset. I'm telling you, he didn't move." And her husband kept saying, "We didn't do anything. We just wanted to leave." And their kid was crying. I told them they did the right thing. I told them they could go. I said the date and time out loud. I said my name and my job. I asked the questions. The man sat down. He folded his hands like he'd seen it done. He stared at the tabletop. I asked if he understood me. He nodded once. That startled me because it was the first response I'd gotten from either of them. I said, "Okay, good. What's your name?" He opened his mouth and then closed it. He swallowed hard. His throat moved. No sound. I leaned forward and lowered my voice because I was thinking maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he couldn't talk. Maybe he had some condition. I said, "Can you write?" He looked at the pen, then at me, then back at the pen. He picked it up and held it wrong, like a kid. He touched it to the paper and made a mark that wasn't a letter, just a hard slash, and then he dropped the pen like it burned him. I said, "All right, okay, we can work with something else." And while I was talking, I heard that doorknob click again behind me. One click. I froze. I looked at the man. I looked at the man. He was smiling that copied smile, but this time his eyes were still on the table, not on me. Like the smile wasn't for me. It was like he was reacting to something else in the room. I stood up fast and opened the door. The hall was empty. The office was empty too, up front, because the other ranger had stepped out to patrol and the night clerk was in the bathroom. The building was making its own noises, the wind hitting the siding, the fluorescent hum, the distant pop of something in the ceiling. I shut the door and sat back down, and I told myself. I went on with the questions. I asked where he'd been camping. I asked who he was with. I asked if he needed medical attention. He didn't answer. His breathing was that same too quiet breathing. And then, man, I'm telling you, the recorder picked up something it should not have picked up because I listened to it later. While I sat there asking questions, I could hear my own voice. I could hear the chair creak. I could hear the pen drop. But under all that, faint, like somebody standing right behind the microphone, there was breathing that did not match the man's chest. Like somebody big trying to stay calm. And I didn't notice it in the moment. In the moment, I only noticed the air in the room felt thicker, like it was harder to take a full breath. Like the room was using up oxygen faster than it should. The man lifted his head and looked at me, and his eyes were wet like he'd been crying without tears falling. It was like he tried to speak and the sound got caught, like a choke. And then he pressed his lips together hard and shook his head. Not no, but like he was trying to shake something off. I said, hey, it's okay, you're safe. And I hate that I said that because it wasn't true. As soon as I said safe, the lights flickered once, just once, and the recorder's little red light blinked like it almost shut off, and the doorknob clicked again, and then it turned. Not all the way, just enough for the latch to strain, like somebody on the other side was trying to open it slowly. I stood up so fast my chair scraped, and I grabbed the knob from my side and held it. I held it like you hold a door when the wind is trying to rip it open. But the wind wasn't pushing from the hall. The wind was outside, and this was a steady pressure, patient, like a hand. I yelled, "Who's out there?" And my voice came out higher than I wanted. The pressure stopped. The knob stopped turning. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the hum and my own breath, and then the knob clicked back, like whoever it was changed their mind. I opened the door, and the hall was empty again. Empty in that clean way. No shadows moving, no feet sound, nothing. I walked down to the front office and called out for the clerk, and she answered from the back bathroom, annoyed, like I'd interrupted her. And I asked her if she'd been in the hall, and she said no, she'd been in there the whole time. I asked if anyone came in the building, and she said no, she'd hear the front door. I went back to the interview room, and the man was standing now, facing the corner where the old camera sat dead. His hands were at his sides. His shoulders were stiff. I said, "Sit down," and he didn't move. I stepped closer and said it again, and his head turned a fraction toward me, and his mouth moved, and I thought he was going to make a sound, and then he did, and it was the first clear thing he did the whole time. He breathed out, long, and it sounded like relief, like somebody else had finally arrived. I backed up because I could feel it then. The certainty of being observed by nothing visible, like the room had eyes that weren't in the walls. I called dispatch and told them I needed a deputy. Now. And I didn't explain why, because what do you say? The door is trying to open itself. The air is wrong. The man is acting like he's waiting for an invisible person. What do you say, without sounding like you're losing it? We transported him. And again, I thought, okay, maybe it's coincidence. But that night, after everything was done, I remembered the recorder. I went back into the interview room and picked it up off the table. The red light was still on because I forgot to stop it. I stopped it and put it in my pocket, and I went home. I told myself I'd log it later. I ate my sandwich at midnight because I realized I hadn't eaten. And I sat on my couch in my work pants, boots still on. And I played the recording back because I wanted to hear if the man had made any sound, if there was anything I missed that could help the deputy. At first, it sounded normal. My voice asking questions. Chair creaks. The pen drop. Then the doorknob clicks. And on the recording, it sounds louder than it sounded in my memory, like the microphone loved it. Then there's my voice saying, "Who's out there?" And then there's silence. And under the silence, there's that breathing. Not mine. Not the man's. It's too steady. Too close. It's like somebody is leaning right over the recorder, breathing into it like they're testing it. I felt my whole body go cold. I sat there and rewound and listened again. Same breathing. Same slow inhale. Same slow exhale. And this is where I need you to believe me, because I know how it sounds. Under the breathing, there was a faint scraping, like a boot sole on linoleum. One step, then a pause. Not in the hall. In the room. Right there. But when I was in the room, I never saw anybody move. I never heard footsteps. I would have. Man, That room is small. Any movement makes noise. On the recording, it was there anyway. I didn't sleep that day. I went back for my shift on no sleep, wired and shaky, and I brought the recorder because I wanted to show the deputy. The deputy wasn't there. He was busy. I told myself I'd show him later. I put the recorder in my desk drawer. I did my work. The storm finally hit that afternoon. Hard rain. Wind so strong it made the trees bend like they were bowing. The power flickered twice. We ran on backup. The building sounded like it was being hit with handfuls of gravel. I sat at the front desk and watched the rain smear the window, and I kept thinking about breathing in an empty room. That night, around 10:30, after the other ranger left and the clerk went home. Night shift is like that. But that night, alone, felt different. The air in the hall felt cooler than it should. The hum of the lights felt louder. I kept catching myself listening for the doorknob. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself I was going to walk back there, stand in the interview room, prove to myself it was just a latch, a gust, a trick of memory. So I did. I walked down the hall, and I stood outside the interview room door, and I stared at it. And I felt stupid standing there, like I was afraid of a door. I opened it, and the room was empty, obviously. Empty table, 2 chairs, dead camera, same smell of old carpet and cleaning spray. I walked in, shut the door, and I sat in the chair where the suspect had been sitting. I looked at the corner. I listened. I heard nothing but the building and the storm. I laughed once, a short, ugly laugh, because I felt embarrassed. I pulled the recorder out of my pocket, set it on the table, and hit record. I said out loud, "This is Wade. I'm alone in the interview room, date and time." And I said it like I was documenting a science experiment because I needed to act like I was in control. I sat there for 5 minutes. Nothing happened. I started to relax. I thought, see? It's nothing. Then, man, I swear to God, I heard the first sound from the corner. Not a voice, not a footstep, a soft tap, like a fingernail on plastic. Then another, slow, patient, coming from the corner where the dead camera was. I held my breath without meaning to. I stared at the corner. The camera didn't move. The wall didn't move. Nothing moved. Tap, tap, tap. And then I heard breathing again, right by the recorder, like somebody leaned down next to it. I could feel my skin tighten all over my arms. I stood up so fast my chair tipped back. And when I stood, the tapping stopped. The breathing stopped. I rushed to the door and opened it, and the hall was empty, and the front office was empty, and the storm was roaring outside, and the building was humming, and it felt like the whole place was pretending to be normal. I walked back to the front and sat down, and didn't go down that hall again. I didn't tell anyone, because what do you tell them? That you heard a tap in an empty room. I didn't even listen to it. I put it on my kitchen table and I went to bed and stared at the ceiling until sunlight came up. And when it didn't make me feel better. It just made me feel like I'd survived something and didn't know what. The next night, I drank coffee even though it made my hands shake. Around midnight, dispatch called and asked if I could check the service road because there'd been a vehicle spotted near the closed gate. I drove out there. Nothing. No vehicle. No tracks. Just puddles and mud and the reflection of my headlights. I turned around, and on the way back, my radio crackled with a burst of static that lasted too long. And in the static, I thought I heard a voice. Not a word, just the shape of someone trying to talk. I turned the volume up, and it went back to normal like it never happened. I got back to the office, and I tried to shake it off. I told myself I needed sleep. I told myself I was hearing things because I'd listened too hard to that tape. I sat at the desk and filled out a report about nothing. Not the radio. The landline. We almost never get landline calls at night. I picked it up and said the standard greeting. There was silence. Not hang-up silence. Live silence. like someone was holding the line open. I said hello again. Still nothing. Then I heard breathing. Right in my ear. That same slow, deep breathing. I pulled the phone away from my head and stared at it like it was an animal. I said, "Who is this?" And the breathing stopped. And then the line clicked, like it hung up. I stood there with the receiver in my hand, my mouth dry. I checked caller ID. It said unknown. I called dispatch and asked if they'd transferred anyone. They said no. I asked if they'd had any weird calls. They said no. I hung up and I stared down the hall toward the interview room. And I had the strongest feeling that if I walked down there, that door would be open. Even if I'd left it locked. I didn't walk down there. I stayed in the front office with all the lights on. I kept my radio on. I kept my truck keys on the desk like I might need to run. When my shift ended, I went home and I listened to the recording from the night before. The one where I sat alone in the interview room. I wanted proof. I wanted to hear it and say, "Yes, there it is. I'm not crazy." I played it. At first, it was my voice. Date and time. Alone in interview room. Then 5 minutes of building noise and storm. And then, right at the moment I remember hearing tapping, the recorder captured something different. It captured a faint sound like a chair leg dragging. Slow, and then it captured my chair tipping, which made sense. But under that, it captured the breathing, louder than before, like it wasn't trying to hide anymore. And then, man, I heard my own voice say something I do not remember saying. On the recording, after the breathing starts, there's my voice, quiet, like I'm talking to someone across the table. And I say, "I understand. I never said that. I swear I never said that." I paused the recording and sat there with my mouth open, feeling like the floor tilted. Then I hit play again, because I thought maybe I misheard. The breathing continues, slow, deep, and then there's another voice, not mine, not the man's from before. A low voice, close to the microphone, and it says, my name. It says, Wade. It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It says it like someone trying to get your attention, in a quiet room. I felt my stomach drop so hard it made me nauseous. I rewound it and played it again. Same thing. My name, clear, close. Like the speaker was inches from the recorder. I sat there in my kitchen with that sound filling the room, and I kept looking over at the dark hallway in my trailer like something might step out. I didn't go back to work for 2 days. I called in sick. I lied. I said stomach bug. In a way, it was. It felt like something had gotten into me. On the 3rd day, I forced myself to go because I needed the money and I didn't want to be the guy who quits because of a sound. I went in early, daylight still up, and I asked the daytime supervisor if the interview room door had been sticking. He looked at me like I was being weird and said no. I shrugged and said paperwork. I did not tell him about a voice saying my name. I kept the recorder in my pocket like a weapon, and I hated that I did that because it felt like I was inviting it. That night, nothing happened until close to the end of my shift. Right before dawn. And dawn that day took forever. The sky stayed dark longer than it should. The storm had passed, but the clouds still hung low like they weren't done. Around 5:10, the front door of the office rattled like someone tried it. I looked up from my desk and listened. The door handle didn't turn. It just rattled again. Soft, like a test. I got up and looked through the glass. No one. No silhouette. No movement. The parking lot was empty. My truck sat under the light. Rainwater pooled in the cracks. I stepped outside anyway, because I didn't want to be afraid of my own building. The air was cold and smelled like wet cedar. I stood on the porch and looked around. Nothing. I stared at it like it might bite me. It rang 3 times, then stopped, then rang again. I picked it up and I didn't do the greeting. I just said, "Stop." There was silence. Then the breathing. Slow, annan, deep, steady. I said, "Who are you?" And the breathing kept going like it didn't care what I asked. I held the receiver away and watched my own hand shake. Then, in the background of the call, I heard a sound that made my skin go tight because I'd heard it before. A doorknob clicking. Not my front door, the interview room door down the hall. Click, 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 like someone was turning it back and forth, testing the latch. I didn't move. I froze at my desk, with the phone in my hand, listening to the breathing and the clicking and the hum of the lights. And it felt like my body was trying to decide whether to fight or run, but my mind was stuck. The clicking stopped. The breathing stopped. The line went dead. I hung up and sat there in the quiet, and my ears rang like after a loud noise. I grabbed my radio and called dispatch and asked if they could send someone to sit with me for the last hour. I tried to make it sound casual. I said I had a weird feeling, maybe somebody messing around the building. The dispatcher asked if I wanted a deputy. I said yes. While I waited, I did something I regret. I walked down the hall to the interview room. I did it because I needed to see the door with my own eyes. The hall lights buzzed. The carpet felt damp under my boots, like the storm had soaked into the building. When I got to the door, the handle was not fully down, but it was not fully up either. It sat just a little off, like someone had touched it recently. I put my hand on it, and it was cold, colder than the rest of the building. I told myself that was nonsense. Metal gets cold. I took a breath and I tried the handle. Locked. Solid. I leaned close and listened. The door was not flush. I put my shoulder against it and pushed gently, and it shifted a fraction, like it wanted to open but couldn't. I pulled back and my heart was pounding. I did not open it. I did not go inside. I turned and walked back to the front office fast, and when I sat down, I realized my recorder was on. I didn't remember turning it on. I don't know when it turned on. The red light was blinking. My mouth went dry. I held it up and stared at it like it was an eye. I hit stop. I sat there waiting for the deputy. And when he arrived, he saw my face and asked what was wrong. I almost told him. I almost said, "Listen, something is happening. I have it recorded. You need to hear it." But the word stuck in my throat because the moment you say it out loud, you become the guy saying crazy things at work. The deputy checked the building. He checked the back. He checked the hall. He checked the interview room door. He said it was locked. He smiled like I was jumpy and said storms make people weird. He left. My shift ended. I drove home in daylight and still felt like I was being watched from the passenger seat. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and played the recorder back. This is the part that breaks me, man. I hit play and I heard the front office hum. I heard my footsteps down the hall. I heard me breathing. And then I heard the landline ring faint in the distance. And then I heard the phone receiver lift. And then I heard that breathing on the line. And under it, I heard the doorknob clicking. And then I heard myself whisper. Not loud, but clear. "I understand." And then I heard the other voice again, close to the microphone. Calm. And it said, "Good." One word. Good. Like a teacher approving a student. I slammed the recorder down on the table so hard it bounced. I sat there with my hands over my mouth. I replayed it. Because denial makes you stupid. Same thing. My whisper. That voice. Good. Then there was a pause. And then there was a sound that should not have been on that recording because I was not in the interview room. It was the interview room lock. That specific metal scrape when the deadbolt turns. I know it because I lock that door sometimes when we store evidence overnight. And then you can hear the door open. Just a little, because the hinges squeak in that room. They always have. And then you can hear a chair move, like someone pulled it out. And then you hear breathing. Right there. Close. Deep. Like someone sitting down at the table with the recorder. And then you hear my voice again. But it's not in the front office anymore. It's in that room. Close. Like I'm sitting across from someone. And I say, "What do you want?" I did not say that. I was in the front office. I never went in the interview room. The recording makes it sound like I did. Then there's silence for a long time. And in the silence you can hear that slow breathing. And then you hear another sound, soft, like fingers tapping the table. And then the other voice says, again. One word. Again. And then, at the very end of the file, after a stretch of quiet, you hear a click that made my blood feel like it turned to ice. Because it's the sound of the interview room door unlocking from the inside. Not the latch. The lock itself. The bolt retracting, and then you hear the door open wider. And you hear the hall air rush in, and you hear footsteps walk out. Slow, steady, boot soles on linoleum. And then the recorder stops. It doesn't stop like I hit stop. It stops like the batteries got pulled. It just cuts. I sat there in my kitchen staring at my wall like it might change shape, and I realized my hands were shaking so hard my teeth were clicking. I drove back to the office that afternoon with the recorder in my pocket, and I walked straight to the interview room. I did it in daylight because I needed daylight like I needed air. I opened the door. The room was empty. The chairs were pushed in. The table was bare. The dead camera in the corner stared like a blind eye, but the lock was turned. I know I locked it. The deputy checked it and said it was locked. The recording says it unlocked from inside. The door stood there, innocent in the sun, like it had never been touched. I went into the room, and I stood by the table, and I held the recorder in my hand, and I said out loud, "If somebody's messing with me, it isn't funny." My voice sounded stupid in that small room. I waited. Nothing happened. I left. I quit 2 weeks later. I told them I needed to take care of family. I lied because the truth felt like poison. I moved my trailer to a different lot on the edge of town. I replaced the lock on my own door twice. Bathrooms at gas stations, back offices, storage rooms. Anywhere with that same smell of old carpet and humming lights. I cannot do it. I can't. My friends laugh sometimes. They say I'm picky. They say I'm jumpy. And I smile and let them think that because I would rather be laughed at than have them look at me with that quiet concern that says they don't believe me. I still have the recorder. I put it in a metal toolbox and shoved it under my bed. I told myself I'd destroy it, smash it, throw it in a lake, bury it. But I can't. Because part of me thinks it's the only proof I have that I'm not losing my mind. And part of me is scared that if I break it, whatever's on it will come out anyway. I did one more thing, and I hate myself for it. Because curiosity is a sickness. Last week, I woke up at 2:58 inches the morning, sweating like I'd been running, and I heard a sound in my trailer that I recognized before my brain even caught up. A soft click, like a lock turning, not my front door. I don't lock my bedroom door. I sat up so fast my neck hurt. The trailer was quiet. No footsteps, no voice, just the hum of my fridge and the distant highway sound. I laid there, holding my breath, listening. Then, from under my bed, from the toolbox, I heard it. A faint tap, like a fingernail on plastic. One tap, then another. Slow, patient, like it was reminding me it didn't stay in the park office. Like it was letting me know the room followed me. I'm telling you this because if you ever hear a recorder pick up breathing when you were alone, if you ever hear your own voice say words you don't remember saying, if you ever hear a lock turn when nobody's there, do not go looking for it. Do not try to prove it. I tried to prove it and it proved me instead. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it stands when you aren't looking. I just know it likes rooms with doors. It likes questions. It likes tapes. And it can unlock things from the inside. The body that didn't cool. My name's Cody Runnels. I'm from Rattler Bend, Texas, and I work as a spill cleanup tech. The kind that shows up after other folks already decided what happened, and they just want the mess gone. I'm saying this at 3 in the morning behind my trailer because I tried saying it inside and I kept hearing the refrigerator click on like footsteps. And I know that sounds stupid, man, but I'm telling you, I cannot sit in a quiet room anymore without my head doing that thing where it starts counting minutes on its own. I haven't slept right since it happened. I keep washing the same work shirt, and the stain is still there. Not oil, not mud, something gray and chalky along the cuff, like I leaned against a wall that wasn't supposed to have dust on it, and I know exactly what day it got there, because it was the day I ate 2 warmed-up biscuits for breakfast and still felt hungry like I never ate at all. I made those biscuits at 6:30, the cheap kind in a tube, and I burnt the bottoms because the skillet in my trailer runs hot on the right side. I had one with grape jelly and one with a slice of bologna because the fridge was bare and I didn't feel like driving into town. And I drank gas station coffee left over in a paper cup from the day before. That's how normal it was. That's how plain it was. The radio was talking about the wind and some cattle auction and a school board meeting. I put on my faded blue work shirt with the company patch stitched on the chest, and I remember thinking I should sew that patch down tighter because it was curling at the corner. My boots were still damp inside from the last job, so I shoved a paper towel in each toe like that helps. Then I checked my phone, and the dispatcher had texted at 7:14 a.m. Just a short one. Remote call. County request. Roll at 9. I remember the exact time because I looked again and again later. Like if I stared at it hard enough, it would change. I left at 8:32 because I always leave early and sit in the truck for a minute, and I watched a neighbor's porch light flicker like it was about to die. The air was cold enough to make the inside of my nose sting, but the sky was clear and pale like it hadn't decided if it wanted to be day yet. I drove with the window cracked because my defroster's been acting up and the windshield fogs if I breathe too much, and I kept picking at the split skin on my thumb until it bled a little. I punched in on the company app at 9:01 even, right when I hit the county road that turns off the highway and starts doing that long, empty thing where it feels like you could drive straight forever and never reach a house. That's when it was still just work, just another call. Just another site where people talk serious and you stand around waiting for someone to tell you what to do. The message I got after that said, "Meet at gate, Ranch Lane, bring lights." I loaded my portable floodlights in the bed because sometimes you're cleaning up after dark, or sometimes the place is shaded by trees and they want good visibility. I didn't know I was bringing lights for something that didn't want them. No, wait. That's not fair. I'm already jumping. It didn't feel like something wanted anything at first. It felt like nothing at all, like a blank spot, like a place where the world forgot to finish drawing itself. The ranch road had no sign, just an old welded gate with a chain that looked newer than the posts. And there was a white county SUV parked half in the ditch, like the driver didn't care if he blocked anything. A man in tan pants and a dark jacket was leaning on the hood with a notebook, and another guy I didn't recognize was smoking without really smoking, just holding it and letting it burn down. When I rolled up, the guy with the notebook looked at my truck like he was checking it against something in his head. And he said my last name like he already knew it. Runnels. But I hadn't given it yet. I swear to God I hadn't. I had my window down and I said, "Yeah, that's me." And I waited for him to say how he knew. And he didn't. He just nodded once and said, "You're late." I laughed because I wasn't late. I was early. And I even pointed at the clock in my dash because I'm that kind of person. I like being right about the little stuff. It said 9:17. He shook his head like he felt sorry for me and said, "We've been here since 9. Then he wrote something down. That's the first wrong detail. Not big, not a scream, just a man telling me the time didn't match and acting like I was the one confused. The smoker guy flicked ash and said, Gate won't stay shut. Like that was the important part. The chain was still on it. The latch was still down. But when he said it, I looked, and the gate was open about a foot, not swinging, just sitting open like someone had pushed it and it decided to stop there. I got out and walked up and grabbed the metal, and it was cold enough to bite, and I pulled it shut and hooked the chain like it already was, like I was doing it for show. The smoker guy watched me like he was trying not to make a face. "See?" he said, and he didn't point, but I saw it anyway. The latch vibrating a little, the chain giving tiny clicks like someone was tapping it from the other side. No wind. The grass along the ditch barely moved. The world was still. I said, "That's weird, because what else do you say?" And notebook guy said, "We're not here about the gate." Then he told me, real flat, "There's a body on the property. We need you to wait until we clear you. Then you're going to handle a small diesel spill near the equipment shed. But you're not going near the house," I said. "I'm not going near the house." And I meant it. I didn't want any part of whatever happened. I've worked enough scenes to know you don't touch anything and you don't look too hard because later people ask what you saw and you can't unsee it. He asked me what I had for breakfast. Like he was making conversation, like it mattered. I told him the biscuits, jelly, bologna. I held up my hands, dirty nails, split thumb, and I said, "Not since last night." And he wrote that. Then he asked what time I woke up. I said 6:06 because I remember seeing the clock on the microwave blink after a power hiccup. And I remember thinking it's always 6:06 when I wake up. It's been that way for months. He wrote that and finally looked me in the eyes and said, "Okay, listen. If you hear someone call your name from the brush, you do not answer. If you see a flashlight moving where there shouldn't be one, you do not follow it. If you think you left something behind at your truck, you check your truck first before you go looking anywhere else." I stared at him, and I did that little laugh again, that nervous one, and I said, "Is this a prank?" And he didn't laugh. Smoker guy finally took a real drag and said, "Just do what he said." Then notebook guy added, like he was adding a safety warning about snakes, "And whatever you do, don't look at your phone for the time. It's not helping anyone." That made my stomach turn cold because he had already argued about the time. I said, "Man, I've got a job to do." And he said, "I know. That's why you're here." Then he opened the gate wider and waved me through like a school crossing guard. And as my tires rolled over the cattle guard, I heard the chain on the gate click like it was being unhooked behind me. I stopped and looked in my mirror. The gate was shut again, chain up, latched. The two men were still standing by the SUV like they never moved. I drove slow down the ranch lane, gravel popping under the tires, mesquite and scrub on both sides, and the lane kept curving just enough that you couldn't see more than 50 yards ahead. The sky was still that pale, in between, but it wasn't brightening like it should. It was stuck. The kind of light you get 10 minutes before sunrise. Except it stayed like that. I kept glancing up like the sun was hiding. I swear to God it was hiding. About a quarter mile in, I saw the house. Not a big ranch house, just a single-story place with a covered porch and a couple of windows facing the lane. Nothing fancy, but it looked wrong. Not spooky, wrong. Practical wrong. Like someone built it and forgot to finish. The porch posts were there, but the railing wasn't. The front steps were there, but the bottom step didn't touch the ground. It hovered a couple inches above the dirt, like the earth had settled away from it. I told myself the gravel made it look that way. I slowed down more, and my headlights washed over the porch, and the porch light turned on by itself. Then I remembered the rule about not answering your name and not following lights, and I felt dumb because I was already thinking about it like it was a rule I'd always known. And I shouldn't have been able to see behind it because of the trees, but I could, like the air was too clear, like there wasn't enough distance in the world. I could see an equipment shed farther back, tin roof, and a dark shape near it that might have been a tractor. That's where my spill was supposed to be. I parked near the shed and shut off my engine, and the sudden quiet made my ears ring. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and I told myself, out loud, it's just a quiet morning, like saying it would make it true. Then my phone buzzed. A text from dispatch. It said, "Where are you? You missed the gate check." I looked at the time. 9:17. Same as before. I stared at it until my eyes watered. The seconds ticked. But the minutes didn't change. I watched it. I watched the seconds roll, over and over. And it stayed 9:17 like it was stuck on a display model in a store. My mouth went dry. I wanted to throw the phone out the window. Instead, I locked my screen and shoved it face down in the cup holder like it was a bug. I got out and started unloading my lights, because that's what I do when I'm scared. I do tasks. I did the latch, pulled the first light stand down, set it on the gravel. The metal legs made a small scraping sound that seemed too loud. I went to the bed again and realized my gloves weren't there. I always keep nitrile gloves in the top toolbox, left side, next to the absorbent pads. I opened it. Empty. Not empty like someone stole them. Empty, like it was a different toolbox. My pads were gone too. The small bag of granules was gone. The only thing in there was my old tape measure and a socket wrench I haven't used in months. I stood there and I felt that hot flush in my face, the one you get when you're about to get angry. And I said, no, just like that, because I knew I had loaded the spill kit. I loaded it last night. I remember because I tripped on the box in my garage, and I cursed. I caught myself because I try not to talk like that. But I remember the feeling of it, that little flare, and I remember setting it in the truck bed. I know it was there. I stood by the open toolbox and did a dumb thing. I checked my pockets like maybe gloves turned into pocket-sized gloves. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Same number. Stop checking the time. That's when I got cold. That's when the fear stopped being a nervous joke and turned into something else. Something heavy. Like a hand on the back of my neck. I looked around the property. The shed door was half open. Inside was dark. But not just shadow dark. It was like the darkness had weight. Like it was packed in there. The air smelled like old fuel and dry dirt. I walked toward the shed because I needed my kit, and because standing still felt worse. My boots crunched gravel, and each crunch felt delayed. Like the sound came a half beat after my foot hit. I told myself it was the cold air doing weird things. I reached the shed door and pulled it wider. A stack of feed sacks, some rusted tools, a plastic jug of oil. Normal. Then, I saw my gloves. Sitting on top of a feed sack like someone placed them there, perfectly folded, the blue nitrile box open like a mouth. I grabbed it so fast my fingers shook. I looked back at my truck. The toolbox lid was still open. I hadn't closed it. I could see the empty space where the kit should be. I looked back at the gloves. I didn't remember carrying the glove box into the shed. I didn't remember setting it down. It was just there now. That's the second wrong detail. Not big enough to prove. Big enough to make you feel foolish. I shoved the glove box under my arm and walked back out, and that's when I heard my name. Not shouted, not dramatic. Just a man's voice, like someone calling across a yard. Cody. It came from the brush line to the right of the shed. However, it came from the brush line to the right of the shed, where the mesquite thickened and the ground dipped. I froze so hard my back hurt. I didn't answer. I held my breath and listened. The voice came again, same tone, same distance. Cody. Like whoever it was hadn't moved, like he was reading it off a list. I swear to God my tongue wanted to answer by itself. You hear your name and your body responds, but I didn't. I turned slowly and stared into the brush. Nothing, just branches. Then, closer, I heard boots on hard ground, slow steps, not in the brush, on something flat, like linoleum. That made no sense because we were outside. I stood there with the glove box and my heart punching. and I tried to figure out where linoleum would be. The house. The house had floors. I shouldn't have been able to hear inside the house from the shed, but I heard it anyway. Boots on a hard floor. Slow, like someone pacing in a hallway. I backed away from the brush and told myself, "Get to the truck." And I did. Fast but not running, because running feels like admitting you're being chased. When I got to the truck, the passenger door was open. I know it was closed. I always lock it. I climbed in, slammed it shut, and my spill kit was sitting on the passenger seat like it had been there the whole time. Absorbent pads, granules, everything strapped together. I stared at it like it was a live animal. I looked down at my cup holder. My phone was face down like I left it, bright through the glass reflection. And I didn't want to look, but I did. And the time was still 9:17. I swear to God, it was still 9:17. I turned the key, and the engine didn't start on the first try. It clicked once like a dead battery, then started like normal. I sat there with the engine running, and I realized my hands were shaking so hard the steering wheel was buzzing. That's when Notebook Guy's warning made a kind of sense in my head. Not logic sense, but survival sense, like he'd been through it. I told myself, do the job. Do not go near the house. Do the job. I put on gloves and forced myself out of the truck. I walked around to the back of the shed where the dispatcher said the diesel spill was, and sure enough, there was a dark patch on the dirt near a rusted drum, like someone tipped a can. The smell hit my nose, sharp and oily. Real. Normal. I felt relief so strong I almost cried. Man, because a spill is a spill. You can clean it. You can see it. You can fix it. I laid out pads, poured granules, did the motions. I kept my eyes on the ground like if I didn't look up, nothing could change. That's when I noticed the footprints. My boot prints. Fresh, clear in the dusty dirt, leading away from where I was working, toward the house. I stopped mid-scoop and stared. I hadn't walked that way. I hadn't. The prints were the exact tread of my boots, including the little chunk missing on the left heel. I lifted my left foot and looked at it. Missing chunk. Same. The prints went straight toward the porch steps that hovered above the ground. Then they stopped at the bottom step like whoever walked there had stepped up into the air. No prints on the porch boards, just gone. I swallowed and tasted diesel in the back of my throat. I looked over my shoulder toward the gate, like maybe I could just leave, job unfinished, drive through the fence if I had to. The sky was still pale. Still not sunrise. The light hadn't changed at all. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to touch it, but it buzzed and buzzed like an angry insect. I finally grabbed it and saw a missed call from an unknown number, and beneath that, a text. You already went to the house. Don't do it again. I stared so long my eyes burned. Then I did the thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I looked at my hands like maybe they'd have dust on them from the porch. I turned slowly and looked at the house. The porch light was still on. The front door was open a crack, like it had been all along, like it was inviting air in. I heard boots on linoleum again, closer this time, like whoever was inside had moved to the front room. I stood frozen with a scoop of granules in my hand, and I said, "Quiet. Not to the house. Not to anyone. Just to the air. I'm not going in there." And then, from somewhere that wasn't the house and wasn't the brush, from somewhere wrong, I heard my own voice repeat it back. Same words, same tired tone. "I'm not going in there." Dude, I felt my stomach drop. I whipped around like someone was behind me, and there was nothing but the shed wall and the drum and the spill. I looked back at the house again, and the door was wide open now. Not slowly opening, just open like it had always been open, and my eyes were late. I made myself finish the spill cleanup, because if I left it half done, it would feel like the place won. And I know that sounds like a child talking about monsters, but I'm telling you, that's what my brain did. It started making rules and bets. I sealed the waste in a bag, tied it tight, Loaded it in the bed. I checked my watch. The second hand moved. The minute hand didn't. I ripped the watch off my wrist and threw it in the cab because I couldn't stand it. When I turned back, the footprints to the house were gone, smoothed over like someone swept the dirt. The dirt was undisturbed everywhere, like no one had walked there all morning. My breath came out in little white puffs, and the air tasted metallic, like blood but not blood, like a penny on your tongue. I patted every pocket, checked the bed, checked the ground. Gone. Then I heard the chain at the gate click, far away, like someone was unhooking it. I looked down the lane. The gate was still shut, but it was moving, just a tiny sway, like it wanted to open. My phone buzzed again, this time a picture message. I shouldn't have opened it. I did. It was a photo of my truck from behind, taken from the porch of the house, and in the photo, my passenger door was open, and I was sitting inside, head turned like I was talking to someone in the back seat. There was no one in the back seat, but my head was turned like there was. I stared at that photo until my vision tunneled, and I realized the timestamp in the corner said 8:49 a.m. I backed up until my shoulders hit the truck, and I slid along the side toward the driver's door like I needed the metal against me. That's when the investigator showed up. I didn't hear him come down the lane. He was just there near the shed, a man in a dark jacket, same notebook guy. But his face looked different now, older somehow, tired in a deeper way, like he'd been awake for days. He looked at my watch on the seat through the window and then looked at me and said, "Did you check it?" I couldn't talk at first. My tongue felt too big. I finally managed, "It won't change." And he nodded like that was expected. He walked past me toward the house, and I grabbed his sleeve without thinking, and I said, "Don't," because I didn't want him to disappear too. And he looked down at my hand like he hated being touched and said, "I have to." Then he said, real quiet, "If I leave before sunrise, it follows the next one who shows up." I said, "Before sunrise," and I pointed at the sky, because the sky was still stuck, and he didn't look up. Row. He just wrote something in his notebook and said, "Sunrise is not a time, it's a condition." Man, I didn't even know what that meant, and I still don't, but hearing him say it made me feel like I was talking to someone who knew a secret that was going to ruin me. He walked toward the porch, and the boots on linoleum started again inside the house, matching his steps in a way that made my skin crawl, like a metronome. He stopped at the bottom step that didn't touch the ground, and he looked at it for a long second, then stepped up like it was normal. His boot landed on the porch board, and I heard it, loud, and the inside boot stopped. Then, from inside the house, I heard a single slow step, like whoever was in there had shifted weight. The investigator said, not turning around, "Don't come up here." I stayed by my truck, my hands gripping the door frame so hard my knuckles hurt. He pushed the front door open wider and went in. The door did not swing. It slid, like it was on rails. That's wrong. Doors don't do that, but it did. He disappeared inside. And for a moment, nothing happened. No sound. No movement. Just that dead stillness and the porch light buzzing. Then I heard him speak, muffled, like he was in another building far away. He said, "Sir, can you hear me?" Then he said, "Sir, you need to open your eyes." Then he said my last name, Runnels, like he was calling to me. Runnels, like he was calling to me, and I flinched so hard my shoulders jumped. I didn't answer. I didn't. I swear I didn't. But my phone buzzed again, and I saw a new text on the screen. Answer him. It was from my own number, from my own contact. Like I had texted myself. I held the phone like it was burning, and I whispered, "No." and the phone buzzed again with another text. "You're already inside." That's when I made the worst decision, because I needed proof that I wasn't losing it. I needed something solid, so I walked to the edge of the porch, not up the steps, just close enough to see inside through the open door. The inside looked normal. A living room with a couch, a table, a hallway leading back, and on the floor near the hallway was a body under a sheet. Just a shape. No blood, no mess, nothing graphic. The sheet rose slightly at the chest, like the person was breathing, just barely. But it couldn't be, because notebook guy said it was a body, and the air smelled like that dry metallic thing again, and the porch light buzzed louder, and then the investigator's voice came clearer, like he was standing beside me, and he said, "Feel it." I froze. My brain screamed at me not to move, but my feet did, like they were being tugged by a string. I stepped onto the first step, and my boot did not touch it. It touched air, and then it touched the porch board, as if the step was never there. I took one more step and I was on the porch without climbing. I didn't like that. I hated that. The sheet on the body moved again, and I swear to God I saw a hand shape press up from beneath it. Not waving, just pushing, like someone testing fabric. The investigator said, "It's been like that for hours." Then he said, "It won't cool." He sounded hollow, like he'd said those words too many times. I stood in the doorway and did not go in. I didn't. My boot stayed on the porch, and still, in my mind, I could feel the temperature of the room, like warm air leaking out. The kind of warmth you feel standing near a running dryer. It wasn't a hot room, it was just alive, warm, like something had just been there, like something was there now. The investigator stepped back into view from the hallway, and his face looked wet, not with blood, with sweat, like he'd been running. He held his notebook up, and the pages were blank, all his writing gone. He looked down at it like it betrayed him. Then he looked at me and said, "You came anyway." I said, "I didn't," and my voice cracked, and I hated that it did, because it made me sound guilty. He shook his head once and said, "Then you left and forgot, and it let you forget, because forgetting is how it keeps you useful." I said, "That's not possible," and he said, "It's happening." Then from under the sheet, the body shifted, slow, like someone turning in sleep. The sheet slid just enough to show the outline of a shoulder. Still nothing graphic, just the wrongness of motion. The investigator whispered, "It's not the body," and his whisper sounded like mine, like it had my tired rhythm. He stepped toward the door, backing out, and he said, "I'm leaving before sunrise." I said, "There is no sunrise." And he finally looked up at the sky through the doorway, and for the first time his face changed, like surprise and anger mixed, and he said, "It's holding it." Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He looked straight at me and said, "Don't be the last one here." And then he walked past me, off the porch, and down the lane toward the gate. Fast. Not running, but almost. Like he knew every second mattered. As soon as his boots hit the gravel, the boots on linoleum sound inside the house started again, faster, like whoever was inside had stood up. The sheet on the body lifted a little, like someone underneath was taking a breath. The air got warmer. Not like heat, like closeness, like a room filling with people. I backed away from the door until my back hit the porch post. I wanted to jump off the porch and sprint to my truck and smash through the gate. But my keys were still missing. I patted my pockets again, frantic now, and my fingers brushed metal. Keys. In my pocket. Cold. There the whole time. I stared at them in my hand, and my brain did that sick twist where you realize you can't trust your own senses. I ran, man. I ran to my truck. I slammed myself into the driver's seat and jammed the key in the ignition, and the engine started instantly like it had been waiting. The lane felt longer. It felt like it had more curves than before. I kept thinking I was about to see the gate, and it wouldn't appear. My phone slid off the cup holder onto the floorboard and buzzed like crazy. I didn't look. I didn't. Then I heard, from my back seat, a soft sound like fabric shifting, like someone settling in. I didn't turn my head. I kept my eyes on the lane. I swear to God I kept my eyes forward, but I felt breath behind my ear. Not hot, not cold, just present. And a voice that sounded like mine said, calm as anything, "You forgot your breakfast." I shook my head hard like I could shake it out and said, "No." And the voice said, "You never ate." I gripped the wheel so hard my wrists hurt. I saw the gate up ahead and relief hit me like water. The investigator was there by the SUV, notebook in hand, smoker guy beside him. Both of them watching my truck like they'd been waiting the whole time. I slammed to a stop. I rolled down the window and shouted, "Open it!" And notebook guy held up a hand, palm out, like stop. He leaned down and said, "What time is it?" I almost screamed. I almost did. Instead, I swallowed and said, "I don't know." And he nodded. He said, "Good. What did you have for breakfast?" I said, "Biscuits." And my voice broke. And he said, "What kind?" I said, "Grape jelly." And he said, "Did you eat?" I hesitated, and in that hesitation I felt something in the back seat shift again, like impatience. I said, "Yes." Notebook guy's eyes went sad. He said, "No, you didn't." Then he stepped back, and the smoker guy unhooked the chain, and the gate swung open like it had never been stuck. "Go," notebook guy said, "and don't stop until you hit pavement." I didn't argue. I drove through. The moment my tires crossed the cattle guard, the sky changed. Dawn snapped into place like someone flipped a switch. The sun wasn't rising slowly. It was just suddenly there, low and orange, blinding me through the windshield. My eyes watered hard, and I laughed and cried at the same time. Man. Because it felt like being released from underwater. I hit pavement and kept going, and for 2 miles I didn't breathe right. Then I heard, from the back seat, very gently, like someone talking to a child, "Sunrise is a condition." I almost wrecked. I pulled over so hard the truck rocked, and I twisted around, and the back seat was empty. No one. Just my old jacket and a plastic bottle rolling on the floor. I sat there shaking, and I told myself it was stress. It was shock. It was my brain making patterns. I drove home. I went inside my trailer. I washed my hands. I ate something real. I looked at the clock. It said 9:17. I checked my phone. 9:17. My microwave clock. 9:17. My truck dashboard. 9:17. I ripped the batteries out of the wall clock, and it still showed 9:17 because it was stuck at that time anyway. I sat on my couch and stared at my hands and realized I couldn't remember the drive back from the ranch. Not the highway, not the turns, just the moment dawn snapped in and the voice behind me. I looked down at my sleeve and that gray chalky stain was there on my cuff, like I'd leaned on something dusty. When I tried scrubbing it, it didn't lift. It just smeared. I called dispatch to ask why they sent me, and they said, "We didn't. You were off today." I called the county number from the text, and it rang once and went dead. When I tried again, it played a recording that said the number didn't exist. I went out to my truck to get air, and my spill kit was gone. Not stolen. Gone like it was never there. In its place, on the passenger seat, was my glove box. Open, empty, and inside it was a single folded note page from a small notebook. And on the bottom corner, like someone pressed it with a dirty thumb, was a faint gray print, not a fingerprint, more like a smear. And when I touched it, it felt warm. Not sun warm, body warm. That's why I'm outside right now behind the trailer, because inside the trailer the fridge clicks and the walls settle, and every time something makes a little sound my brain puts boots on it. Boots on linoleum, slow pacing, testing a latch, like someone moving around in a hallway that doesn't belong to my house. I don't drive that county road anymore. I don't go near ranch lanes with no signs. If I see a gate with a chain that looks newer than the posts, I keep driving. And the worst part? Man, the part that makes me feel sick when I try to sleep is that sometimes I wake up and my microwave says 6-6, like always. And sometimes it says 9-17, and on those mornings I'm starving like I never ate, and I can taste metal in the air, and I catch myself listening, real still, waiting to hear if the house is empty or if it's occupied by nothing visible. And I'll be standing at my sink looking at my own hands, and I'll hear my name, gentle, from somewhere that isn't outside and isn't inside. And I won't answer, and I won't even turn my head, because I don't know if answering is what makes sunrise happen, or if answering is what keeps it from ever coming. The call that was never logged. My name's Colt Rigsby. I'm from the scrubby edge of Quemato, where the pavement gives up and turns to caliche, and I work as a state park ranger on the night shift. Listen, I know how that sounds already, like I'm trying to sell you some spooky story, but I'm not doing that, man. I'm sitting behind my trailer because the inside feels too quiet right now, and the porch light keeps making bugs slam themselves to death. And every time my phone buzzes, my chest tightens like it is that radio tone again. I have not slept right since it happened. I've tried. I swear to God I've tried. I lay there and I do the breathing thing. I count in my head. I tell myself it was just a bad call, a glitch, something dumb. But then I hear it in my teeth, that little chirp the dispatch line makes, and my body thinks it's time to go again, and I'm back out there on those roads where the mile markers don't match what you just drove. I need to say it out loud. I need somebody to hear it. That day started so normal it hurts to think about. I had 2 toaster waffles because that was all I had left in the box, and I burned the edge because the toaster in my trailer runs hot on the right side. I ate them standing at the counter in my socks because the floor was cold and gritty, and I didn't want to track it into my boots yet. I used the last of the syrup, the cheap kind that smells like caramel, and it dripped on my uniform shirt when I leaned over to set the plate in the sink. I wiped it with a wet paper towel, but it left a dark stain right under the pocket seam, like a bruise. And I remember thinking, great, now it looks like I can't eat like a grown man. I put the shirt on anyway because I was running late, and I told myself nobody would notice in the dark. I brushed my teeth, put on deodorant, and I looked in the mirror, and there was that little red line on my cheek from sleeping on my arm. I stared at it like it meant something. That is what I do now. I stare at little things like they are warnings. I grab my keys, my radio, my flashlight, my notebook, the little laminated map we keep in the rig, and the thermos I fill with coffee that never tastes right. The coffee smelled burnt, like the pot had been sitting too long, but I drank it anyway because night shift makes you do that. I stepped outside, and the air felt like cold metal. Not freezing, just sharp, like somebody put a sheet of tin in your mouth. The sky was clear and hard, no clouds, and the stars looked too close, like you could bump your head on them if you stood on the hood. My truck, the department unit, was covered in dust from the service road, and when I opened the door, that dust smell came up like old paper. I punched in at 6:58 p.m. at the Little Ranger substation by the lake access gate. We don't have a big building, just a low office with a humming light and a couple of chairs that squeak, and a bathroom that always smells faintly like bleach. I signed the log with the same pen that always skips, and I wrote my unit number, and I wrote the weather, because we always do. Clear, light wind, visibility good. I remember writing it neat. That matters to me. I like neat. Neat means you are in control. I did the quick check of the rig, lights, siren, fuel, first aid kit, cones, extra batteries. I put my flashlight in the door pocket where it always goes. I checked my spare radio battery. I did everything the same, like a ritual. I said hi to the day guy, Buck, who was ready to go home and looked like he'd been chewing on bad news all day. He said, "You got it quiet tonight." And I said, "Good." And I meant it. I wanted quiet. There had been some petty theft lately. Nothing big, just coolers and a couple of gas cans from campsites, and a bunch of folks leaving trash like they owned the dirt. Quiet sounded like a gift. At 7:14 p.m., I did my first loop through the main camping area. Kids were still up. You could hear them squealing around the picnic tables, and somebody had a speaker playing music too loud, and the smell of grilled meat was everywhere. I waved at a couple in a big fifth wheel who always has the little string lights up, and the woman waved back like she knew me. And I thought, this is fine. This is a normal job. I stopped at the entrance kiosk and checked the lock, because sometimes the latch sticks and you have to lift it just right. I took a sip of coffee and it burned my tongue. I remember that too, like my body was trying to leave breadcrumbs for later. Around 8:30 p.m. one parked at the overlook for a minute and filled out a couple notes in my book about a downed signpost near the trailhead. The wind picked up a little. The lake made that low slapping sound against the rocks, steady, like a slow hand clapping. I looked at my phone and saw one missed call from my mom earlier in the day, and I thought I should call her back, but I didn't, because night shift brain tells you everything can wait until after the rounds. I wish I had called her. I wish I had done something different. Anything different. So I could point at it and say, that was the moment I stepped off the right path. At 9:11 p.m., the radio did that little pre-chirp, and then the dispatcher's voice came through. A woman's voice, calm, clipped, like always. Unit 12. Stand by for a call. I said, 12, go ahead. She said, we have a distress call. Possible medical, possible domestic. Caller is incoherent. Location given as County Road 907. Reference to a gate with a white star. Address not confirmed. Can you respond? The way she said it, it sounded routine, like she'd read it off a screen. County Road 907 is out past the far edge of our jurisdiction. It's not even really a road half the time. It's one of those county lines that turns into rutted dirt and then into nothing. Also, the caller being incoherent, possible domestic, that's not really our usual. I said, dispatch. Confirm location. That's outside park boundary. There was a pause. Not a long pause. Just enough to feel like somebody covered the mic with a hand. Then she said, caller insists it's within your area. Says it's near the old service spur off the west fence line. Says someone is hurt. I felt that little tightening in my stomach you get when a call is weird but not weird enough to refuse. I said, 12. En route. Request sheriff notified. She said, copy, sheriff notified. They are delayed, you are nearest unit. And then, right after that, right after she said it, there was something else on the line. Not another voice. Not static exactly. It sounded like a breath right up close to the mic. Like somebody leaned in and exhaled slow. It made my skin go cold under my shirt. I actually looked at the radio like it could explain itself. I said, dispatch, say again. And she said, 12, copy en route. And her voice was normal again. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself maybe. She sighed. People sigh. I started driving. The first part of the route was familiar. Past the last campground loop, past the locked day use gate, onto the service road that runs along the west fence line. That road is rough, but I know every bump. I know the place where the mesquite branches stick out and scratch the passenger side if you don't hug left. I know the shallow dip where rainwater sits and makes mud even when everything else is dry. I drove it slow. Windows up. Heater on low because the air was cold metal, like I said. My headlights made that tunnel. And everything outside it was just black. About 10 minutes in, the radio chirped again. Unit 12, confirm your 1020. I gave my location. Approximate, West Fence Line Service Road, near marker W6. She said, copy. Then there was that breath sound again, closer this time. And under it something that could have been a voice far away, like a person talking through a wall. I could not make out words, but the rhythm of it felt like somebody trying to speak. I said, dispatch, you got someone on your line. She said, negative, line is clear. And then she said, hurry, like she forgot herself. Just that one word, hurry. Dispatchers don't say that. They say, respond, proceed with caution, update when on scene. They don't say hurry. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I remember the feel of the vinyl, gritty from dust. I remember the syrup stain on my shirt pressing against my chest where the seatbelt crossed it. I kept driving. The service road ends at a locked gate that separates the park from a stretch of county land. There's a chain, a padlock, and a sign that says, authorized personnel only. I have the key. I always use it when I have to check fence damage or stray cattle, but it's not common. That night, when I got to the gate, the padlock was already hanging open. The chain was unhooked, draped like a tired arm. My first thought was, somebody's been in here. And my second thought was, why didn't I notice any tire tracks earlier? I got out, and the cold hit my face hard, and the wind made the chain tap the metal post. Tap, 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 like a fingernail. My flashlight beam picked up dust swirling low to the ground. I knelt and looked at the dirt. There were tracks, but they were not fresh like you'd expect, not crisp. They looked smeared, like somebody had taken a broom and brushed them sideways. There were also footprints, boot prints, but the tread pattern was wrong, too smooth, like the sole was worn down to nothing. I stood up and I looked at the gate, and that's when I saw it. A white star painted on the inside of the gate post. Not on the sign, not on the gate itself, but on the post facing inward. I have driven past that gate 100 times. I have put my hand on that post. I have never seen a white star there. It was small, like somebody did it with a paint marker. 5 points. A little uneven. I touched it with my glove and it was dry. Not sticky. Not fresh. Dry like it had been there for weeks. My throat went tight. I said out loud, to nobody. That is not supposed to be there. I got back in the truck. I radioed dispatch. 12 is at West Boundary Gate. Gate found unsecured. White star marking present. No visual on caller. Dispatch. Then she said, proceed through the gate. Follow the road until you see the house with the single porch light. Caller is inside. Says, do not knock. Do not knock. That made my skin prickle. I said, dispatch, what is the name on the call? Another pause. She said, no name provided. Caller ID blocked. I almost laughed, but it came out like a cough. This is rural Texas, man. People don't have their caller ID blocked unless they are hiding from somebody or trying to hide themselves. I should have waited. I should have told her, I am holding until sheriff arrives. But I didn't. Because of that word. Medical. Because if someone is hurt and you sit there, you never forgive yourself. I drove through. The road on the other side was narrower, and it was not a road I recognized. It should have been a 2-track that runs along a pipeline easement. But this was packed dirt, smooth, like it had been graded recently. There were no tire ruts, no loose gravel, just a flat, dark ribbon cutting through brush. My headlights picked up fence posts that looked newer than the ones around the park, straight and pale. I watched for landmarks, for the old windmill that leans, for the big dead oak, for anything. Nothing matched. The radio stayed quiet, and that was worse. My odometer ticked up. I kept checking it. I drove 3 miles, then 4, then 5. I should have hit the county line by then. I should have seen the pipeline markers. I did not. Instead, the road curved gently and kept going, and the brush on either side got taller, more like cedar than mesquite, and the air in the cab started to smell damp, like wet cement, even though there had been no rain. I turned the fan off because it felt like the smell was coming through the vents. Around mile 7, I saw a sign on the right side, reflective, like a street sign. I slowed and shined my light. It said CR 907. The letters looked too clean, too sharp, like it had just been put up. I stared at it and tried to anchor myself. Okay, County Road 907. That is real. But the angle of the sign was wrong. It was facing away from the direction I came from, like it was meant for someone driving the other way. The road behind was just darkness. No reflection from that sign. Like it wasn't there when you looked from that side. My mouth went dry. I said, no, wait. That wasn't when it started. It was earlier when the gate was open. But this is when my brain started to slip, like it could not get a grip on the facts. I radioed dispatch again. 12. I am on CR 907 per signage. Mileage does not match. Confirm address or cross street. Her voice came back, and it sounded farther away, like she was speaking from another room. She said, "You are close. Keep going. Do not knock." Then the breath sound came again, and this time it was not a breath, it was a sound like fabric rubbing, like somebody moving close to the mic. And under it, clearer, a voice, low, whispering, not the dispatcher. It said my unit number. It said 12. It said it like it knew me. I looked down at the radio screen. The display usually shows the channel and the time. That night, it showed a string of numbers that did not make sense, like a phone number, but too long. Then it blinked and went back to normal. I told myself my eyes were tired. I told myself it was interference. I kept driving because what else do you do when your brain keeps making excuses for you? Around mile 9, the fog started. It came in low, like it rolled along the ground. It wasn't thick like you see in movies. It was thin, but it caught the headlights and made everything look washed, like you were driving through smoke. It tasted metallic when I breathed, like pennies. The road dipped and then rose, and at the top of the rise I saw it, a porch light. One single yellow bulb hanging over a small structure. It was more like a long, low building, maybe an old field office or a bunkhouse, with a shallow roof and a little set of steps. The light made a small circle on the ground, and everything outside that circle was nothing. There were no other lights, no yard light, no window glow, no dogs. That is what got me, man. Rural places always have dogs. Even if the people are gone, a neighbor's dog barks at your headlights. Here, nothing. I parked a little ways back and turned my headlights off. The darkness swallowed me fast. I sat there and listened. My own breathing sounded loud. The engine ticked as it cooled. The radio was silent. I took my flashlight and my radio and my baton. The one they tell you is for compliance, but you mostly use it to point at things. I got out, and the fog wrapped around my legs like damp cloth. The ground under my boots felt too smooth, like hard-packed clay. I walked toward the light, slow. The building came into view, and the first thing I noticed was the door. It was open, just a crack. Not wide, but not closed. The porch light swung a little, back and forth, like it had been bumped recently. Tap of the chain at the gate. Swing of the porch light. Little motions like the place was breathing. I stopped at the bottom step. I remembered the dispatch instruction. Do not knock. I stood there like an idiot, holding my light, staring at a door that was already open. I said, "Hello, Ranger service, is anyone there? My voice sounded wrong in that fog. Muffled. No answer. I said it again, a little louder. Still, nothing. I heard something then. Inside. Not a voice. A sound like boots on linoleum. Slow. One step, then a pause, then another step. And I knew right away there should not be linoleum out here. In some random county building. Maybe concrete, maybe old wood, but not that smooth, hollow sound. My stomach dropped. I took one step onto the porch. The wood creaked under me. The boots inside stopped. I waited. Then the boots started again, but they did not come toward the door. They moved sideways, like someone pacing parallel to the wall. The sound went left, then right, then left again. The same number of steps each time, like a pattern. I swallowed. I said, "I'm here to help," somebody called in. The pacing stopped. Then, from somewhere deeper inside, I heard a phone ring. Not a cell phone ring, not a modern chirp. An old ring, like a landline, sharp and insistent. It rang 3 times. Then it stopped. Then my radio chirped, and the dispatcher said, "Do not go in." And that is when my brain split. Man, because she had told me to go, to hurry, to not knock, to find the porch light. And now she was telling me, "Do not go in." And I was standing on that porch with that door cracked open and the smell coming out like old dust and something sweet and rotten underneath. I said, "Dispatch, I am on scene. Door is ajar. I hear movement inside. Advise." She said, "Return to your unit. Now." Her voice sounded strained, like she was clenching her teeth. And then, right after she said "now," the other voice whispered again, closer, like it was right behind her voice. It said, "Come in anyway." I backed down the step, 1 foot at a time, not turning my back. My flashlight beam shook a little. The fog made the light scatter. I kept the door in sight. The door did not move. The porch light kept swinging. And no may. I got to the ground and started walking backward toward my truck. And then I stepped on something that was not dirt. It was a piece of paper. It stuck to my boot. Like the ones we get sometimes when we have a description, white paper with black text. My name was on it, Colt Rigsby, Unit 12, my unit number. The timestamp at the top said 9:11 p.m. The call type said distress. The location line said CR 907 White Star Gate, do not knock. Under notes it said, caller requests Unit 12 only. I stared at that paper until my eyes hurt. We do not print like that out here. We don't have a printer in the truck. The substation printer is inside the office, back at the park, and it jams half the time. This paper was clean, not wrinkled, not damp, like it had been placed there. Like somebody wanted my boot to find it. My mouth went numb. I said, "Dispatch. I have paper on scene. Appears to be call sheet with my info. Explain." Silence. I said it again. Silence. My radio screen went blank for a second, like it powered off. Then it came back on and showed the channel again. No response. The porch light stopped swinging. It just hung still. That made the hair on my arms lift. Things don't just stop like that without wind changing, without a hand, without a reason. The fog seemed to thicken. I could not see my truck as clearly. I turned and walked faster, and then I realized something that made me stop so hard my knee popped. My truck was farther away than it should have been. The distance between the porch and the truck had changed. I know what 20 yards looks like. I have paced it out for scene safety 100 times. This was more. It was like the yard had stretched. I blinked hard, like I could reset it. I took a step and another. My boots sank slightly. Like the ground was softer than before. My breathing got loud in my ears. I said, "No, no, I am telling you, I was right there, and now it is farther, and I know you're thinking I'm exaggerating, but I'm not." I kept going, and with every step, I felt like I was walking through that fog for too long, like those stupid dreams where you can't get to the door. Finally, my flashlight beam caught the reflective strip on my truck bumper. I almost cried from relief. I reached the driver door and yanked it open. The inside light came on, and sitting on the passenger seat was my notebook, open, pages flipped back, like someone had been reading it. I had left that notebook on my dash earlier, closed. I stared at it. I reached in and picked it up. On the open page, in my own handwriting, was a note I did not remember writing. It said, "Do not trust the time." It was underlined twice. My pen was on the floorboard, uncapped. I looked down at my hands like maybe they would have ink on them. They didn't. I felt dizzy. I got in the truck and shut the door and locked it, like a lock meant anything. I turned the key. The engine started. That sound should have anchored me. Instead, it sounded muffled, like it was starting underwater. My radio crackled. A voice came through, not dispatch, not the whisper, a man's voice, older, tired. He said, "Unit 12, if you can hear me, do not drive back the way you came." I froze. I said, "Identify." The voice said, "I can't. Just listen. You are not where you think." I said, "Who is this?" The voice said, "You already left once." That made my stomach flip. I said, "Dispatch, I have an unknown male on the channel." The woman dispatcher came on then, sharp, angry. She said, "Unit 12, disregard. Remain in your unit. Do not move. Sheriff is en route. Do not approach the structure again." I said, "Dispatch, confirm you sent this call." She said, "Of course we sent it." Then she corrected herself fast, like she bit her tongue. She said, "Stand by. That tiny slip, man, that is what cracked me. Of course we sent it, then stand by." It sounded like she was reading from two different scripts. The whisper came again, right under her words, like a shadow voice. It said, "Drive." The male voice said, "If you stay, you will not find the gate." I put my hands on the steering wheel. I tried to breathe. I looked at the clock on my dash. It said 9:11 p.m. I stared at it. It had been 9:11 when the call came in. It had been at least 20 minutes since then. I checked my phone. No service. The time on my phone also said 9:11 p.m. I felt cold sweat on my back. I said, "Wait, I forgot to tell you. The coffee in my thermos was still hot." I grabbed it without thinking, and it was hot like I had just poured it. My brain tried to do math, and it slid off. It was white, harsh, like an LED, and it threw a longer beam, like a searchlight. The door of the building was closed now. It had been open. I know it had. Now it was shut, and the window next to it, which I swear was dark before, had a faint glow, like a TV on low. I heard the boots again. Boots on linoleum. Pacing. Same number of steps. Left, right, left. A pattern. I couldn't take it. I put the truck in drive. I drove forward, away from the building, aiming back toward where the gate should be. My headlights cut through fog. The road appeared, that smooth ribbon. I followed it. The radio went quiet, like somebody unplugged the world. The fog got thinner as I drove, and for a second, I felt hope. Like maybe I was just on some weird county property, and my nerves were making it bigger. Then, I saw the sign again. CR 907. Reflective. This time it was on the left side. I swear, it had been on the right before. I slowed and looked at it, and the letters were smeared, like water had run down them. The signpost leaned, like it had been hit. I kept driving. I watched my odometer. It clicked 1 mile. Then another. At 7 miles, I should have seen the boundary gate. Nothing. At 10 miles. Nothing. The road kept going, curving gently through brush that looked the same no matter how far you drove, like copy-paste land. I started to feel that panic you get when you realize you are lost in a place you know you should not be lost. I turned the steering wheel and did a 3-point turn, careful not to go into the ditch. I headed back toward the building, thinking maybe I missed the gate. Maybe I passed it. Maybe it was behind me. Because that is what your brain does. It tries to make it solvable. After 5 minutes, I saw the porch light again. Same spot. Same building. Like the road was a loop. I slammed my hands on the wheel once, hard, and immediately felt stupid, like I was a kid. I said out loud, "Okay, okay, okay, stop. Think." I parked farther back this time. Lights on. Aimed at the building. I did not turn them off. I kept the cab bright. I looked at my map. The laminated park map did not have CR 907 on it. Of course it didn't. I flipped it over to the county reference side. There was a CR 907, but it was nowhere near the park. It was south, by a completely different town. I checked the compass app on my phone, even though there was no service. It worked. It said I was facing north. But the stars outside the windshield did not match where north should be. I know the sky. Man, when you work nights, you learn the sky like a ceiling. Something was wrong above me, too. Like the pattern was shifted. The radio chirped, and this time it was my supervisor, Lieutenant Harmon. At least that's what the ID said. He said, 12, what is your status? Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. I said, Lieutenant, I am on a distress call off West Fence Line, CR 907. I have reached a structure. Instructions from dispatch are conflicting. My time is stuck at 9/11. I need sheriff on scene. I need guidance. There was a pause. Then Harmon said, What? Distress call. I said, the distress call dispatch sent. Possible medical, possible domestic, White Stargate. Another pause. Then he said, Colt, listen to me. Dispatch has no record of that. He said it slow, like he was trying not to scare a child. He said, There is no call on the board. You are not assigned out. You have been in service on routine patrol all night. I felt my throat close. I said, That is not possible. I am looking at the building right now. I gave him my last known, West Boundary Service Road, marker W6, through the unauthorized gate. He said, There is no unauthorized gate open. That gate is locked. Do not go off-road. Do not enter any private property. I said, I'm already on it. I'm already here. I held up the paper call sheet like he could see it. I said, I have a printed call sheet with my info. Harmon said, That is not possible. He said, I am calling you on your cell right now. Do you have service? I opened my mouth and nothing came out because I didn't have an answer. The radio chirped again, and the dispatcher's voice came in, but it sounded wrong now, like it was layered, like two recordings slightly out of sync. She said, Unit 12, you are off assignment. Return to base. Then the whisper voice said, Stay. Then Harmon again said, Colt, return. I pressed my palm to my forehead. I felt like my skull was too small for what was happening. I said, Lieutenant, I need you to stay on the line with me. Harmon said, I'm here. I said, I'm going to try to find the gate again. Harmon said, Do not go near that building. I said, I'm not going in. I put the truck in drive and started forward. The road looped again. I could feel it, like the curve had a familiar shape. I watched for the sign. It came up at mile 2 this time, CR 907, but the letters were different, like someone had repainted them, thicker. I kept going. At mile 5, there was something in the road, a shape. I slowed. My headlights hit it, and my stomach clenched because it was a ranger hat, like mine. The same flat brim, the same band, the same little badge plate on the front. It was lying upside down, in the dirt, like it had been dropped. I stopped and got out, keeping Harmon on the radio in my shoulder mic. The fog was thinner now, but the air still tasted metallic. I walked to the hat and nudged it with my boot. It flipped over. The inside sweatband was dark, stained, like it had been worn hard. My name was written inside in marker, Colt. The handwriting looked like mine. My hands started shaking. I said, "Lieutenant, there's a hat in the road with my name in it." Harmon said, "Colt, get back in your unit. Leave it." I did. Fast. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt it in my ears. I said, "That is my hat." Harmon said, "Your hat is on your head, Colt." I reached up without thinking. My hat was on my head. I pulled it off and stared at it in my lap. It was mine. It had the same little crease in the brim from when I sat on it once by accident. I looked back out at the road where the other hat had been. It was still there, faint in the headlight beam, like a twin. I felt like I was looking at a mistake. I drove around it. I did not touch it again. I kept going. At mile 7, I saw the gate. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. The boundary gate, chain, padlock, the post. I slowed and pulled up. My headlights lit it up. The padlock was closed now, chain tight. Exactly how it should be. The white star was still there on the post, and now it looked older, chipped, like it had been weathered for years. I got out, flashlight in hand, and walked up to it. The padlock was ours, the right one, with the department stamp. I reached for my key ring. My fingers fumbled. I found the key. I put it in the lock. It turned. The lock popped open. The chain fell heavy. That sound should have been normal. Instead, it sounded like it echoed too long, like the night kept repeating it back. I pulled the gate open and drove through, back toward the park. The road on the park side should have been rough again, full of ruts. It was smooth. I felt my stomach drop. I looked in my rearview mirror. The gate behind me was still open, but the post looked different. Taller, like the proportions were off. I kept driving. I should have hit the service road junction in a minute. It took 5. I should have seen the park boundary signs. I saw none. The brush looked wrong. Too tall, too dense. The sky looked wrong. The stars were dimmer, like someone put gauze over them. Harmon kept talking, asking me questions, trying to keep me anchored. "What do you see? What does the terrain look like? Are you on the service road? Are you safe?" I answered like a robot. I said, "I am driving. I am trying." I said, "I see brush. I see road. I see fog pockets." My voice sounded far away to my own ears. Then, without warning, the road ended. It did not curve. It did not fade. It ended like someone cut it off. The headlights hit a wall of chain link fence. Tall, with barbed wire on top, like a perimeter fence around an industrial site. There was a gate in it, but not our gate, and on the gate was a sign with no words, just a symbol. A white star. The same white star. My stomach twisted. I hit the brakes and sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring. Harmon said, "Colt, what is it?" I said, "There is another fence, Not ours. Another gate. He sounded scared now, and hearing fear in his voice made me feel like I might pass out. I said, "I know." I tried to reverse. The truck backed up a few feet, and then the tires spun like they were in mud. I looked out and the dirt behind me looked wet, dark, like recent rain, but my headlights showed no puddles. The tires dug in anyway. The smell in the cab changed. It smelled like that building again, sweet and rotten underneath dust. I held my breath. The radio chirped. Dispatch voice, layered, said, "Unit 12, you missed your turn." Then the whisper voice said, "Open the gate." I squeezed the wheel until my hands hurt. Harmon said, "Colt, listen to me. Do not open any gate you do not recognize. Stay in your vehicle." I said, "I can't go forward. I can't go back." Harmon said, "Turn around." I said, "There is no room. The ditch is deep." Harmon said, "Try." I tried. I rocked the wheel, forward and back. The truck fishtailed a little, tires grabbing and slipping. The radio crackled with that breath sound, louder, like someone breathing right into my ear. I felt tears sting my eyes. I said, "I swear to God, somebody is on the line breathing, and it is not human. It is not right." Harmon said, "Colt, keep your eyes on the road." I said, "There is no road." Then the headlights flickered, just a flicker, like the battery dipped. A shape standing too still. It was the size of a man, maybe, but the way it held itself was wrong, like it was leaning forward slightly, like it had been paused mid-step. I blinked and the headlights steadied and the shape was gone. I said, "Lieutenant, there was someone behind the fence." Harmon said, "Colt, get out of there." I said, "I'm trying." I floored it. The tires caught suddenly, like the mud turned to solid, and the truck jerked backward hard, and I almost hit my head on the steering wheel. I turned, heart hammering, and as the truck pivoted, my headlights swept across the fence line. And for a second, I saw the sign on the gate close up. No words, just the white star. But around the star, scratched into the metal, were marks like tally marks. A lot of them. Hundreds. Like someone had been counting how many times something happened. I looked away because my stomach threatened to come up. I drove away from the fence, back the way I thought I came, but the road behind me was not there anymore. Just brush thick, like it had grown in instantly. I hit the brakes and sat there, breathing fast. Harmon kept saying my name, over and over, like he could keep me tethered. "Colt, Colt, answer me. Colt." I said, "I'm here." Harmon said, "Turn your lights off for 1 second and back on." I said, "Why?" He said, "Do it." I did. The darkness hit like a punch. In that 1 second, I heard it. Boots on linoleum, right outside my truck. 1 step. Pause. Another step. I snapped the lights back on. Nothing. Just brush. No building. No fence. No road. My chest hurt. I started crying then. Quietly. Like my body did it without asking permission. I wiped my face hard with my sleeve. Syrup stain. I tasted salt. I said, "Lieutenant, I think I'm losing it." Harmon said, "You are not losing it. Listen to me. Read the log." I said, "What log?" He said, "Your notebook." The notebook that had moved. Read what it says. I grabbed it with shaking hands. It was open to another page now. Not the "Do not trust the time" page. Another page farther in. My handwriting again. It said, "The call is a door. Do not answer it twice." Under that it said, "If you hear your number whispered, do not speak." My throat went dry. I realized I had been talking constantly on the radio, answering, arguing, asking. I had been feeding it. I said, "Wait, I forgot." The whisper said my number, and I answered it. Harmon said, "Colt, stop talking on the radio unless I ask you a direct question." He sounded like he was trying not to panic. He said, "Use short answers. Keep your mouth shut otherwise." I nodded like he could see. I forced myself to breathe slow. I looked at the dash clock again. 9:11 p.m. Still. I looked out at the sky. The stars seemed to be in the wrong place again. Like the ceiling moved. I turned the truck in a slow circle, trying to find any sign of the road. The headlights picked up a line of posts in the distance, like a fence line. I drove toward it carefully. As I got closer, I saw it was our west fence line, the one that marks the park boundary. Relief hit me again, weak this time, like my body didn't trust relief anymore. It felt like stepping onto solid ground after being in deep water. I drove fast, faster than I should on that road, but I needed to see the substation lights. I needed to see something normal. Harmon stayed on the line, steadying me with his voice. I kept my answers short like he said. "Yes. No. I see it. I am on the service road." Then my radio chirped with the dispatch tone. And even though Harmon told me not to speak, my whole body reacted. The dispatcher voice, the layered one, said, "Unit 12. You are returning. Copy." I did not answer. The whisper voice underneath said, "Good." Harmon said, "Colt, do not answer. Keep driving." I kept driving. The park boundary gate came into view, the real one. It was locked. I slowed and stopped. I got out, hands shaking. Opened it with my key. Drove through, closed it behind me like if I left it open, something would follow the gap. I drove straight to the substation. The smell of bleach in the bathroom was there, like always. Buck, the day guy, was gone. The logbook on the counter was where it should be. I parked, got out, and almost fell because my legs felt weak. Harmon said, "Colt, I'm coming to you. Stay put." I said, "Yes." I turned my radio off. I turned my phone on and off. No service still, but the time jumped the moment I turned the radio off. It went from 9:11 p.m. to 12:47 a.m., like it had been holding its breath. My stomach flipped. I looked at the wall clock in the substation, 12:47 a.m. I looked at my watch, 12:47 a.m. I felt dizzy, like the world had snapped back and my body was still lagging. I went inside and sat in the squeaky chair and put my head in my hands. My notebook was still open. The pages fluttered a little from the fan vent. I stared at my handwriting until it blurred. Harmon arrived 20 minutes later with another ranger, Jana, and 2 sheriff deputies behind them. Their headlights lit up the lot. Their radios were normal. Their faces were normal. But the way they looked at me was not normal. Harmon came in and crouched in front of me and put a hand on my shoulder. He asked me to tell him everything, start to finish. I did, shaking. I showed him the call sheet paper. He took it like it was a snake. He looked at it, then looked at Jana. Jana said, "Where did you get this?" I said, "It was on the ground by the building." Harmon said, "There is no call. Dispatch has no record." I said, "Then why does this have my name?" Harmon didn't answer. The deputies asked where the building was. I tried to describe the road, the gate, the white star. They went out there with me at 1:30 a.m., full convoy. We drove the service road. We reached the boundary gate. It was locked, padlock closed, chain tight. No sign of it being open earlier. We checked the post. No white star. Just peeling paint and old staples from past signs. I felt my skin crawl. I said, Harmon said, Colt, maybe someone marked it and you saw it in the headlights and now it's gone. I said, it was painted. Jana walked the dirt, looking for tire tracks. Nothing unusual. The deputies drove the county road route that would match CR 907 on the map. They said there is no spur off the west fence line that connects to it, no porch light building, no chain link fence with a white star. Nothing. I felt like I was floating outside my own body. I kept saying, I was there. I was there. Harmon kept saying, I believe you saw something, but we cannot find it. Then he said, and this is the part that makes me feel sick. He said, Colt, you were off radio for 2 hours. From 9:11 p.m. to 11:13 p.m., no transmissions from you, no GPS ping from your unit, nothing. Then, at 11:13 p.m., your unit GPS popped back up at the overlook by the lake, like you'd been there the whole time. I stared at him like he was speaking a different language. I said, that is not true. He said, it is what the system shows. Jana said, your routine patrol log shows you drove the campground loop twice, stopped at the overlook, then returned to substation. She said it like she was reading a report. I said, that is not what happened. One of the deputies, the older one, asked me if I'd been drinking. I laughed once, sharp, and then started shaking again. I said, no. I said, I had burned waffles and coffee. I said, look at my shirt, syrup stain, I remember everything. Then I stopped because I realized I did not remember everything. I did not remember the 2 hours they said I was off. I remembered the call. I remembered the road stretching. I remembered the building. I remembered the boots on linoleum. I remembered the hat with my name. I remembered the fence with the tallies. But when I tried to think about the exact sequence, my brain slipped. Like the middle part was greased. Like I could not land on it. Harmon told me to go home. He told me to take a few days off. He said, we will review the radio logs. We will talk to dispatch. We will figure out if there was any misroute, any prank call. I said, dispatch, talk to me. Harmon said, dispatch denies it. He said the call never came through. He said the dispatcher on duty swears she never spoke to you about CR 907. He said there is no recording. Dispatch recordings are automatic. Every call is recorded. There is nothing. That is why it's called what I called it. The call that was never logged. Because it exists in my body like a scar and in the system like it never happened. I remember because the clock in my truck finally moved again like normal, and I kept staring at it like it was going to freeze. I drove with the radio off. I could not stand the idea of the chirp. I drove with my windows up, heater off. Because the air outside tasted metallic, and I was scared if I breathed it too deep, it would carry something into me. When I got to my trailer, the porch light was on because I leave it on for my mom when she comes by, and the bugs were slamming themselves to death like always. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes before I could make my hands move. I went inside and locked the door and checked the windows twice. I took my hat off and set it on the counter and stared at it like it might multiply. I washed my hands until they were red. I tried to sleep. I could not. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard boots on linoleum, pacing the same number of steps. Left, right, left. A pattern. At dawn, when the light came through my thin curtains, I finally drifted for maybe an hour, and when I woke up, my phone had one voicemail. No number, no transcription, just a blank voicemail with the length showing 0 to 11 seconds. I played it. There was no voice, just that breath sound close to the mic, and right at the end, a whisper. My unit number, 12. I dropped the phone. I sat on the edge of my bed and tried not to throw up. I called Harmon later and told him about the voicemail. He said, there is no voicemail on your phone record. He said, your carrier shows no inbound call at that time. I said, "It's on my phone." He said, "Send it to me." I tried. The voicemail disappeared when I hit forward. It was just gone, like it had never been there. I started shaking so hard I had to sit on the floor. Listen, I know how this sounds. I know. I've replayed it 1,000 times and I keep thinking, maybe I had a stress break. Maybe I fell asleep at the wheel and dreamed it. Maybe I drove somewhere and forgot. Maybe the clock stuck and I panicked and built a story around it. But then explain the paper. Explain my handwriting in my notebook saying things I did not remember writing. Explain why my coffee was hot hours later. Explain why my GPS shows I was at the Overlook when I remember being at that building. Explain why I found that ranger hat in the road with my name inside while my own hat was on my head. That is the part that makes me feel like my skin is not mine anymore. Two versions of me in the same place. One that kept his hat, one that lost it. I went back during the day. I should not have. Harmon told me not to. Yana told me not to. My mom told me to quit my job. And I almost did, but my brain would not let it go. I needed proof. I needed something physical I could point to, so I could stop feeling like I was dissolving. I drove the west fence line at noon. Bright sun, clear sky, no fog. Everything looked normal. The gate was locked. No white star. I drove the county roads outside the park. It was just a normal dirt road with cattle guards and mailbox clusters and dogs barking. No porch light building. No chain link fence. No tallies. I felt stupid and angry. I stopped at a gas station and bought a bottle of water and drank it fast like I'd been in the desert. The cashier asked if I was okay. I said, "Long night." That is what I say now when people ask. Long night. Because I cannot say, I answered a call that did not exist, and it took 2 hours out of my life and wrote notes to me in my own handwriting. I started keeping my radio off more. You can't, not really, you're supposed to monitor, but I started turning it down, lower, like that would protect me. Then, 3 nights later, while I was on routine patrol, parked at the Overlook, the radio chirped by itself even though I had it turned down. That chirp cut through everything. The dispatcher voice came on, normal sounding. She said, "Unit 12, stand by for a call." My whole body went cold. I did not answer. I sat there staring at the lake, hands on the wheel, trying not to breathe. Then, softer, underneath, the whisper voice said, "Answer it twice." I flinched so hard I hit my knee on the dash. I reached and turned the radio off so fast my fingers slipped. The moment it clicked off, the lake sound changed. That steady slap against rocks stopped for a beat, like the world paused to listen. Then it started again. I sat there and shook until my teeth hurt. I reported it to Harmon the next day. He checked the dispatch logs. Nothing. No call. No transmission. He looked at me with that careful face. The face people make when they think you are fragile. He said, "Colt, maybe you need to talk to someone." I said, "I am talking to you." He said, "A professional." I said, "I'm not crazy." He said, "I didn't say you were." But his eyes did. I sat in a small office with a fish tank and a lamp that buzzed, and I told a woman with kind eyes about the white stargate and the porch light and the boots on linoleum. She asked me about stress. She asked me about family history. She asked me if I'd ever lost time before. I said, "No." She asked me if I'd ever heard voices. I said, "No." I wanted to say, "I'm hearing a radio do things radios don't do." But I could tell she would put that in a box with a label. She told me it could be an acute stress reaction, maybe a dissociative episode, maybe sleep deprivation. She told me to sleep more. Man, I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell her sleep is the problem, because at night, when I finally drift, I dream I'm driving that smooth road, and the odometer keeps ticking, and the time stays 9:11. and the porch light is white and harsh, and the door is closed, and the boots pace inside, and my radio keeps whispering my number. I wake up with my heart pounding and my hands clenched like I'm holding a wheel. I started putting my radio in a drawer at home. I started covering the little speaker grill with tape like it was a mouth. I stopped taking night shift calls whenever I could. I traded shifts. I begged off. I made excuses. I said my mom needed me. I said my truck was acting up. I said anything. Because here is the infection part, the proof part, the thing that makes me feel marked. The chirp still happens sometimes, not often, just enough to ruin you. Once, I was in the grocery store, middle of the day, pushing a cart, and my phone made a sound. Not a ring, not a text, a little chirp like the radio pre-tone. My stomach dropped so hard, I had to grip the cart handle. I checked my phone. No notification, no missed call, nothing, just the sound. I looked around like somebody had played it as a joke. A woman 2 aisles over looked at me like I was strange. I left my cart and walked out. Another time, my microwave beeped when it finished, normal beep. And underneath it, I swear, I heard the whisper, 12. I threw the microwave out 2 days later. I tell you that and I hear how it sounds. Like I'm making it up, like I'm losing it. But I'm telling you the raw thing, the ugly thing. I can't stand certain sounds anymore. The squeak of boots on a smooth floor, the hum of a light that has a wrong pitch, the tap of chain on metal, the way a porch light swings and then stops too clean. Unofficially, it was because I was jumpy, and he didn't want a jumpy ranger out there with a weapon and a radio and a bad sleep debt. I was grateful and ashamed at the same time. Day shift is safer. Day shift makes the world look reasonable, but the infection doesn't care about daylight. A week after I moved to days, I was out on a trail check near the maintenance shed. Broad sun, kids laughing somewhere. Normal. I walked into the shed to grab a cone because somebody left a hazard sign down. The shed has a concrete floor with old paint marks. It should echo. I stepped in and my boots made a sound like linoleum, not loud, just that hollow, smooth step. Then, from deeper in the shed, I heard another step answer me. Same sound, same cadence. Left, right, left. A pattern. My mouth went dry. I backed out without turning my back and shut the shed door and put my hand on the latch like it could hold the world shut. I stood there, breathing hard in daylight, like a man having a nightmare standing up. I told myself it was a raccoon. I told myself it was a pipe settling. I told myself it was anything. But I did not open that shed again. I put a temporary lock on it and wrote in the maintenance log that the latch was faulty. It was not. I just needed a reason. Harmon asked later why I locked it. I said, safety. He nodded like he accepted it, but his eyes did that careful thing again. The worst part, the part that makes me sit out here at 3 a.m. talking into my cracked phone, is this. 2 months after the call, Yana found my ranger hat in the lost and found bin at the visitor center. She brought it to me like a joke, like, hey Colt, you losing your mind so hard you're losing your hat now. She laughed. I did not laugh. I took it and my hand started shaking. It was not my hat. It was the other hat. The sweatband was dark. The name inside was mine, but the marker ink looked older, faded, like it had been written years ago. And inside the crown, taped there, was a little square of paper, folded tight. I opened it with my fingers trembling. It was another dispatch printout, smaller this time, like it had been torn from the edge. It had a timestamp, 9:11 p.m. It had one line of text, call complete. Then underneath, in my handwriting, it said, you answered it twice. I dropped the hat like it burned me. Janice stared at me, smile fading. She said, Colt, what is it? I could not speak. I could not tell her because if I said it out loud, it would be more real. Harmon took the hat and looked at the paper. He didn't laugh. He looked pale. He asked where Yana found it. She said, "In the lost and found bin, under a stack of gloves, like it had been there a while." Harmon asked the visitor center staff. They said it had been sitting there since before Christmas, which made no sense because it was summer. It was just there, like that call sheet was just there by the porch. Dropped into my life like a coin into a jar. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen counter and stared at my radio in the drawer. I did not turn it on. I did not touch it. I just stared. I thought about that note in my own handwriting. Do not answer it twice. I thought about how I answered anyway, how I argued with dispatch, how I kept calling, how I kept feeding it my voice. I thought about the 2 hours missing. I thought about the tallies scratched into that gate. How many times has it happened? How many people drove that smooth road and saw that porch light and heard those boots? How many of them came back with a hat that wasn't theirs? How many of them did not come back? I thought about the voice that said, "You already left once." I thought about the possibility that there is a version of me that did not make it out, and the only thing left of him is a hat with my name in it and notes in my handwriting that show up where they shouldn't. I started shaking so hard I had to grip the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. I went outside and threw up in the dirt behind my trailer, not because of sickness, but because my body could not hold the idea. Since then, I don't answer unknown calls. I don't even like answering known calls if they come at night. When I hear the chirp of any radio anywhere, I feel my skin go tight. I stopped going down the west fence line at all. I told Harmon it makes me anxious. He said, "Fine, we'll assign someone else." I see Jana driving that route sometimes, and I want to scream at her to turn back. But what do I say? Don't answer a call that doesn't exist. Watch for a white star that appears where it shouldn't. Don't go to a porch light building that isn't on any map. Don't listen when someone says do not knock. So I stay quiet. I let them think it was stress. I let them think it was a bad night. I let them put it in a box. But it is not in a box for me. It lives in little moments. Like last week when I was driving home from a day shift. Sun setting, normal, and my radio, which I keep off now, chirped once, just once, and then nothing. I pulled over and sat there with my hands shaking. I turned it on, against every instinct, because I needed to know. The channel was clear. No traffic. Then a voice came through, faint, like far away, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. It was my own voice. Not recorded like a crisp replay. Warped. But it was me. And it said, "Dispatch, confirm you sent this call." Then there was a pause, and then the layered dispatcher voice answered, "Of course we sent it." Then it corrected itself. "Stand by." And then, right at the end, a whisper, close to the mic, like breath against my ear, said, 12. I turned the radio off so hard my finger hurt. I sat there on the shoulder with cars passing and the sky turning orange, and I felt like the world was split open right beside me and nobody saw. That is why I am telling you now. Because if I keep it in my head, it grows. It loops. It writes in my notebook. It leaves hats for me to find. It makes the same number of steps in a room that should be empty. It waits for the sound that gets me to answer. And I'm scared, man. I'm scared that one night I'm going to be tired or distracted, or I'm going to think it's probably real this time. Somebody probably needs help, and I'm going to answer it twice without meaning to. And the road is going to smooth out under my tires. And the clock is going to stick at 9:11. And I'm going to see that porch light, and I'm going to walk up. And the boots on linoleum are going to pace left, right, left. And the door is going to be closed when it should be open. And the gate is going to be somewhere it should not be. And this time I will not find the boundary again. This time I will become the hat in the road. This time I will be the missing 2 hours that never happened. And the worst part? The thing that keeps my eyes wide at night is that I don't even know who called. I don't know what I was responding to. I don't know if there was ever someone hurt. I don't know if the distress was real or if the distress was the call itself. I don't know if the white star is a marker or a warning or a tally for something that already took place. I don't know why it wanted Unit 12 only. I don't know why my handwriting shows up on pages I didn't write. I just know the system has no record. Dispatch denies it. The sheriff denies it. The map denies it. The gate denies it. And my body does not deny it. My body remembers every wrong sound, like it is etched in bone. And I'm telling you, listen, I'm telling you clean. No drama, no tricks. If you ever hear a call come through that nobody can confirm, if you ever get told to go somewhere and then get told it never happened, if you ever see a marker that feels like it was placed for you specifically, do not chase it just because you're the nearest unit. Do not tell yourself you're being responsible. Do not trust the time. Do not answer it twice.